There is a big conspiracy behind Jesus Christ that people don't know of, right?
Yes.
Please tell me.
This is where it's going to get really wild.
I love it. Let's go. 2 goats.
Yeah.
One for the Lord and one for Azazel.
Yes.
Yahweh teaches that?
Yes.
How did I miss this?
I know. It's been there the whole time. Yeah. He's saying God didn't command sacrifices when he brought you out of Egypt in the Exodus. He didn't command it. He's rebuking them.
Yahweh did not command to do sacrifices at all.
No.
How do you rebuke this?
With that Jeremiah quote.
Come on. This is God speaking to Moses.
Yeah. But Jeremiah, so check this out.
Wait. Yahweh is the father of Jesus or not? Okay.
Well, we're talking about, no. It's the Most High God. Interesting, right? Well, are there other not high gods? What's going on with that?
Heresy. Blasphemy.
I know.
Love it. There is a big conspiracy behind Jesus Christ that people don't know of, right?
Yes.
Please tell me.
Oh, wow. So what we're about to talk about is what I think is the ultimate red pill. I've watched your content and the guests that you have on. I love everything that they're covering, going so deep down these rabbit holes with the little season and these emerging kind of Christian conspiracy theories and how it maps across the world, the Nephilim, all of these topics, right? But in my personal journey, which we'll get into, my background and how I got here, and ultimately what led to making my film, Christspiracy.
Link is going to be in the description below, guys, so please check it out.
Yeah, which, by the way, it's also now titled What Would Jesus Do? Because sometimes the Christspiracy title can like repel certain people, but it's not a film that debunks, Jesus' existence or anything like that.
Jesus is God, the Son of God, right?
He's absolutely the Son of God. Yeah. So
watch the movie.
But basically, this truth that's unveiled through our film, but really is an investigative journey that I've been on for a long time. And it's not just me. There's biblical scholars and other investigators that have come around the same understanding. And it is really the ultimate deception, I feel. And it maps through all these other conversations that you have, from the little season to the Nephilim to all of it. But where I'd like to start is what the ultimate reveal of our film is. So spoiler alert, if you don't want to give anything away, if you want to watch the film, press pause and come back. But the film lands deeply rooted on this truth about Jesus, the Nazarene, and his resistance to the temple, the Jerusalem temple, and the whole turning over the tables and the money changers and going in, right? Which scholars know is definitely one of the most attested historical events of his life, because there's all kinds of conversation in biblical scholarship. If you come from the side of trying to look at the quote unquote historical Jesus, all of them agree that he was crucified, that he lived, that he was baptized by John the Baptist, and that there was a temple cleansing event. That's the agreed upon historical event. So this is in all 4 gospels.
Love all those 4.
Right.
Especially the last one. I don't like Pharisees. I don't like, meaning authorities, right? Especially when they treat people not like human beings, but like trash.
Right. Well, that's the deeper part of what we go into in the film, is not only what's going on with the human beings in the temple, but also with this sacrificial temple blood cult, and what Jesus is essentially doing and who he is, and a part of his message that's been lost based on misinterpretation, mistranslation, maybe some direct obfuscation of the material, that when Jesus was going into the temple, that he's doing a full frontal resistance against the temple animal sacrificial system. Now, before we go into that, and that's probably going to perk the ears of people and cause a lot of cognitive dissonance. Wait a minute, wasn't temple sacrifice commanded, etc.? We'll get there. But I just want to emphasize, before anybody clicks off, how important this is, especially now in this day and age when we've got the red heifers that are in Jerusalem, or outside of Jerusalem in Silo. They're waiting to be sacrificed to reinstate this third temple. It's this Armageddon-like event. Everybody's, talked about it. That's in the spheres of the kind of guests that you have on the show. We actually interviewed the Texas rancher for our film who sent the heifers over there and exposed a lot about it. And basically all of that to say, what we revealed in our film that we're going to discuss today about the temple and what actually happened in the temple that day, Netflix actually asked for us to censor out of our film. They wanted to take the information about Jesus the Nazarene and who the Nazarenes were and what he was about when he was standing up against the temple that day. They wanted to take that out of our film we had the film originally purchased by Netflix within the first like 4 months of production. Based on my co-director, Kip Anderson's previous success, he's had some films that were bought by Netflix as license deals, right? But they said, hey, we want to buy this and make it a Netflix original straight out of the gate. And so we were like, yeah, super excited. And we worked with them in the background as we filmed for 4 years. But then when we produced our first edit and they saw some of this information, they had a lot of pushback. And there was all these emails and meetings and back and forth. And ultimately, they stood their ground and said, hey, we want to take this information about Jesus the Nazarene out of the film, and we wouldn't do
Pussies.
it. Yeah. So we stood our ground and we said, we're not going to do it. We bought our rights back. We put in some of our own funds, and then we did a crowdfund Kickstarter type of thing to buy the rights back and release it free. And now it's free on our own website that anyone can watch with a pay it forward option if you want to support and get extra content.
Please do, guys. Please do.
Yeah. So that's the story of how I got here and why we're even talking, is because I made this film. And then too, on the red heifer point, which we'll get to, we thankfully were able to release the film in theaters. We got approached by someone who was really into the film and thought that it would make a cool theatrical release, like a limited one. So we went to about, I think 1,400 screens all around the world, and mainly English-speaking nations, but a few outliers. And when we were going to the theaters, they asked us to edit the red heifer scenes out of the film. Yeah, because it was in the wake of the whole October 7th thing and all of that was going on. It was really testy waters, and they just said, hey, they're going the theaters are going to pull your film if you don't do this. And we kind of had to bite the bullet on that one, and we just took it out because we're like, if we don't get this, we saw the theater run.
Once again, pussies. Now you were the pussies.
Now we are. But we wanted to do the theaters because we knew it would be a great way to advertise the film, going to theaters. And then now that we've released it on our own terms, we have that scene back in. It's online, completely uncensored. So we kind of, pick and chose our battles. But
First Amendment, guys, free speech.
Yeah. And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today too, is the way that free speech and our scriptures have been obfuscated, mistranslated around this particular topic, in the same way that we know that the wool has been pulled over the eyes with some of these conversations and rabbit holes that people are going down on your podcast about the little season or about all of this. So, and the piece about this that's so important for anyone listening who's into that other material and the Nephilim and all of these kind of Christian conspiracies that are coming out, for lack of better words, this topic, I believe, is at the heart of it all, and it's the most practically important aspect because it's something that affects us every day. It's a way that we participate in our own deception. It's a way that we participate in our own lack of connection and revelation of the kingdom of heaven on earth and all of that. So where do you want to start?
Now that was a good teaser, guys. So like, subscribe, and there is a link in the description below for Cam's YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that channel as well. Start from the very beginning. What's the conspiracy behind it? Because on purpose, I didn't watch the movie because I want to get the natural reaction and natural occurring questions during the show. So,
great.
Fellas, I know what you're thinking. 3.5 hours. But I encourage you, each and every one of you, watch this episode from the very beginning till the very end, and then make up your own mind. Fact check, reread the scripture, reread the New Testament, the Old Testament, and think for yourself. But those ideas that my guests is going to present on the show is going to cause a lot of emotions and commentary and even fallout. But I promise you that neither me, neither my guests change their minds of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is still the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Son of God, and the God himself. But other topics that Kameron brought on this specific episode is going to be insane. But I encourage you to watch this episode wholly. Guys, you see these people? These are the people that bought me coffee, that became supporters of my show. $5, $10, $15, $20, it doesn't matter. Even $5 truly help me continuing doing what I'm doing right now and having multiple, various, different guests on my show. So if you enjoy my show, if you enjoy me not having and advertising you some kind of a BS, like crypto scam or some magical powder or some alcohol, cigarette, or some energy drinks that I do not consume myself, consider supporting my channel by buying me a coffee. This is the QR code you should scan, or you should find the link in the description below. Click that link and just buy me a coffee. From the bottom of my heart, I thank each and every one of you for doing this. This is crucial to my channel. And now, guys, without any further ado, let's get back to the podcast with one and only Mr. Kameron Waters.
So I'll just start a little bit with my backstory and how I even got here, if that's probably the best way to frame it. So I'm from the South. I grew up in a town called Augusta, Georgia, which is the home of the Masters Golf Tournament. We talked about that earlier, but it's also the home of the Southern Baptist Convention. So I was raised Southern Baptist from a line of Southern Baptist gospel singers and church founders and everything. And grew up very, very immersed in church, loved every bit of it. However, when I, around 17, 18 years old, started taking faith seriously for myself and getting into gospel music, which ended up being my career for the large part of my 20s. It's actually what brought me out to Los Angeles originally. Was I was playing gospel music and working for, I had a few songs get signed to Sony Records and all that. So it was kind of my career at the time. But around 17 years old, when I started taking my faith really seriously, one of the things that I did during that time was a Daniel fast. Have you ever heard of this?
Mm-hmm.
So being that I was raised Protestant, you know, Protestants don't have a Lent like Catholics and Orthodox and everything. We don't really have these types of times where we really go inward and you know, remove distractions from our lives and all that. And my family had come across this idea of the Daniel fast, which was making waves in the Protestant community. And in fact, some of it had become almost like a fad diet at the time in a way, because you had, who's the guy, Chris Pratt, the actor, was going on TV and advertising that he was on a Daniel fast. And back then, Rick Warren, the Purpose-Driven Life guy who wrote the Purpose-Driven Life book, he's Oprah Book Club and all that. He had a big church out here that I used to play drums for in California. Mega church. So he wrote the Daniel plan, and it was all about getting the church healthy and going inward with God and this whole fast. So anyways, I did the Daniel fast. Now, I did it with my family, and for those who don't know, the Daniel fast is built around the biblical prophet Daniel, who's a slave in Babylon. And he's actually an intellectual slave. So he's a little bit of a higher upper echelon slave because he's got adept knowledge already. And so they basically want to treat him really well and glean all of his knowledge off for Babylon when he's in enslavement, right? So they were trying to feed him the king's food. So in chapter 1, we see Daniel and his brothers actually refusing the king's food, specifically the flesh and the alcohol.
And the wine.
In the wine. And he asks for only pulses and water, which is essentially seed-bearing plants and water. And really what it is, which we'll get into later, is it's kind of a reflection of the Edenic ideal. Because in Genesis 1:29, there's a scripture that says at the end of the creation narrative, the whole, you know, all the water and the land is separated and the animals are created, and then it leads up to humans created. And then the climax of the first chapter of Genesis, most people missed it. I missed it when I was a kid until I did this Daniel fast, that it says that for humans, herb-bearing seed and fruit-bearing seed shall be yours for food. And even the animals will eat only herbs, it said. So there was no predation in this Garden of Eden kind of ideal. So Daniel's kind of calling back to that in his time in this fast in Babylon. And it says that the guards who were overseeing him, the king's court, the magi or the eunuchs or whatever, that they were kind of worried, you know, about him doing this, and that they thought the king might even, you know, kill them if Daniel gets sick or something like that. So Daniel says, well, it's fine. Look, just test me for 10 days and see how I fare against everyone else in the kingdom. And after 10 days, it says that he tests healthier, wiser, stronger, more adept with his interpretation of dreams. And he ends up interpreting, you know, the king's dream, Nebuchadnezzar, and he gets promoted to almost like the right-hand man of the king for a while until he becomes a problem. And then they throw him to the lion's den, and the lions don't eat him. And they try to burn him in the furnace, and the furnace doesn't burn him. So for me as a kid, Daniel was like my ultimate superhero. He was like my Marvel comic hero, right? And I was taught his story by VeggieTales. Have you ever heard of VeggieTales?
No.
So in America, we have this kind of cartoon
Oh,
that
I
teaches
know.
Bible stories.
Right.
It's like an animated, like Pixar style. And my first ever VHS tape that I owned as a kid was the VeggieTales episode with the story of Daniel. And what's wild is it tells all of these heroic moments of Daniel, but it skips the part about him doing the fast, about him only eating vegetables. Maybe because they were vegetables. They didn't want to talk about
cannibalism.
Yeah, cannibalism. But I just never got that part. So when here I am 17 years old, taking my faith seriously, and I'm told, oh, if you want to do this Daniel fast, you got to refuse flesh foods and all of that, and alcohol, which I didn't drink alcohol because I was 17. But just eat these simple foods. And man, it was
It's
hard.
not like 17-year-olds do not drink alcohol, right?
Right, yeah.
I was drinking since I was 14.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was experimenting at that time, but it wasn't like a daily thing like meat eating was for me. So at that time, I was raised a hunter, a deep sea fisherman. I would go 40 miles offshore every year in the Gulf of Mexico, now Gulf of America.
Gulf of America, please. Come on, bro. It's almost July 4th.
I know, right? Patriotic. Here we go.
Right. That
So
was America.
I would go deep sea fishing, sport fishing, all of that. And my stepdad owned a barbecue restaurant called To Go BBQ in the South. So I was like deeply immersed in meat eating. So when I found out about this fast, it was brutally hard. I was like, how am I going to do this? I know, my wife is Coptic Orthodox, and the Coptics, they fast without animal foods like 200 something days out of the year if they're doing it right. Now, not all of them do it, but like for their Great Lent and everything. So, but Southern Baptists, they don't do that. So it was like, whoa, this is going to be really, really hard. So I did that. And what happened was I started to experience my own version of just this drawing closer to God, and kind of almost what felt like an awakening similar to what the story of Daniel was saying. Like I just felt that the Bible was making more sense to me. Obviously, too, I was 17, and then I did it again when I was 18. When I would do these fasts, it was one of the first times I was personalizing the scripture for myself, rather than just hearing what the preacher was saying or my parents were teaching me or whatever. I'm reading through. And so I'm like, this is interesting. There's something about this eating this way and this fast that plays in with my scriptural and my prayer and everything that's amplifying all this. Are there any other threads of this in the Bible? Like, is there anything about, and that's how I found Genesis 1:29. And by the way, I know one of your MOs here is that you search up and fact check. Mm-hmm. So at any time you want to stop me and fact check something, okay, go for it. But I found this Genesis 1:29 ideal, and I missed that as a kid. Like, whoa, wait, because rewind all the way back to when I was 8 years old. Some of the seeds of this question that ultimately led me to my film after this fast were planted because I went to, at 8 years old, a Ken Ham creationist conference. Are you familiar with Ken Ham?
No.
So he's like the world's most famous creationist. He built the Noah's Ark Museum in Kentucky. It's a massive replica of Noah's Ark with all the animals in it and everything.
His name is Ken Ham?
Ken Ham, yeah.
Ken Ham.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he came to one of my churches in my hometown, and we went to this conference at 8 years old, and he's telling me the story of the Garden of Eden and creation and how it can be scientifically proven, right? He's like defending that notion. But then he says, and also the Garden of Eden was vegetarian. And he makes a joke about it, because it's the South and everybody's meat eaters, and everybody kind of laughs. And then one of the things that he's arguing, though, is that dinosaurs, the Leviathan and Behemoth, these great grand creatures were living with humans, not before them, like science says with, evolution and whatnot.
Science denier right here.
So he says, look, these creatures are all living together with humans. And then a guy objects in the crowd, and he says, well, wait a minute. You're saying that dinosaur-like creatures are living with humans at the same time in this creation narrative, but you're also saying it was vegetarian. So are you saying dinosaurs were vegetarian? And
but even science says some of them really were.
Yeah, some of them, yeah, like the big herbivorous, dinosaurs that they describe are supposedly vegetarian. With the long necks, I forget what they're called, the Littlefoot.
Never been a big dinosaur guy.
Yeah, me either. But I just remember at 8 years old, this guy objects, and he says, well, how do you explain their canine, the big sharp teeth on the dinosaurs, if they were vegetarian? And then Ken Ham says, well, have you ever tried to crack a coconut with your teeth? And he kind of gestures like they have, their hands down here, and they have to crack. Yeah. So anyways, that imprinted on me as a kid, knowing, oh, there's this idea that Garden of Eden was vegetarian. So when I did this Daniel fast, I went back and I'm like, what's this whole thing about the Garden of Eden and the kind of plant-based ideal, and came to really understand that there's a thread all throughout Scripture that we can talk about today of this kind of coming in and out of Scripture. But then you've got animal sacrifice and you've got all these other stories to contend with it on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so me, as a Southern Baptist meat eater, it started me on a journey of like, hey, what's the truth here? You've got kosher laws, you've got this, you've got that. I really want to make sense of this. And ultimately what it landed on was, again, one of my other big truths as a young Christian growing up in the South. I wore What Would Jesus Do bracelets. I had a What Would Jesus Do Bible club on my playground. In fact, just recently I found a little flyer I made at like 9 years old where I said, come meet me at the slide in the little tube. We're doing a secret What Would Jesus Do book club. And I would pass out these WWJD bracelets. So it landed on that question. What would Jesus do? When it comes to killing animals, eating animals, how we treat animals in general, what would Jesus do? Because there's this story of this biblical ideal supposedly in the Garden of Eden that was lost through sin and falling away and everything, but there's no killing, true dominion, which we can talk about the definition of that, but the animals are created even before humans, and that Adam's naming the animals and supposedly even like almost communicating with them. So what happens between then and Jesus, and what does Jesus have to say about it? Because didn't he eat fish, and didn't he eat the Passover? And so if he did, then how did he do that? What's almost in like an ethical way, because I was raised hunting and fishing, and I was very deeply connected to the loss of life for me to eat an animal and all of that. And when I, really thought about it, I kind of struggled with it as a kid, like watching the fish suffocate and all these kinds of things. So it just brought up all these emotions in my mind. But I was looking for every way I could in the Scripture to justify that it's the way that it is, that we are supposed to kill and eat animals, and God gave us dominion. God created animals for us to eat. I used to have a prayer in my church that we would jokingly say over, barbecue after the service. Good food, good meat, good God, let's eat. We would all like kind of see that. Yeah. So I was deeply in it. So I was fighting and resistant to some of the concepts of this Eden diet and the Daniel fast. But I said, you know what, I'm going to keep researching. And what eventually happened, skipping over a bunch of material that we can go back into, is it led me on this journey towards ultimately making this film, and the central thesis of the film, which is that Jesus stormed the temple and flipped the tables, but there's more to that story that's been lost around animals, and that the temple at the time of Jesus in the first century, Second Temple period of Judea, was a slaughterhouse. And you can even Google, there's been multiple articles written by biblical archaeological reviews and everything about the number of bones and the gutters of blood drained so much of the blood out. It says in a number of the historical writings that the priests were wading up to their ankles or shins in blood. There's so much animal carnage and slaughter going on. But when I was raised, I'm thinking the temple, beautiful house prayer, incense. Maybe there's some animal sacrifice over here in the corner, but Jesus comes in and he sees the money and he sees them selling stuff. And it's almost like getting mad at like a, prosperity gospel type church or whatever. And he's like flipping the tables. You're not supposed to be, selling stuff in here. And what we did in the film is based off of the information uncovered about Jesus the Nazarene, which we'll get to, and who the Nazarenes were and their position against the temple cult at the time, which is very, very controversial, and I can go into the sources on it.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. In order to get atonement, you have to do sacrifices, right? Up to the Old Testament. But in order to have atonement, you have to have a high priest, Ark of the Covenant, do sacrifice and pour the blood on that Ark of the Covenant. Right. And you have to do it in the temple.
Right.
So back in Jesus' days, they didn't have the Ark of the Covenant already. Why were they doing then sacrifices?
So there was a whole temple economy that had been built on exactly what you described. This was the way that was believed at the time to get atonement. And when you really look at the text, our Bible, from the Old Testament to even the New Testament, you begin to see that there's some potential holes in this narrative. Number one, let's go all the way back to the book of Leviticus. And mind you, when we talk about who the Nazarenes were, we're going to frame all this even better around even what is the Leviticus and how did the Nazarenes see it and everything. But until we get there, let's just talk about it at face value.
Okay.
In the book of Leviticus 5:11, book 5, verse 11, or chapter 5, verse 11, it says that you can offer just grain for a sin sacrifice, no blood at all, if you're poor, if you're poor enough.
Yes.
So that raises the question, well, wait a minute, if blood is required for atonement, the sprinkling on the altar and all of these things, then how do poor people get a loophole? It just doesn't make sense. It raises a question. And you can Google that, or I know you look it up.
I know you're
Leviticus 5:11, that they can offer grain offering. Now, fast forward into the Gospels during Jesus' time. Jesus starts his ministry by being baptized by John the Baptist, right? Mm-hmm. John the Baptist is baptizing everyone for the remission of sin. So he's doing an atonement through baptism, through water.
And there's a huge hole in this section. Where did he get this information
Where did
from?
he get this information? Right. And we're going to talk about all that today.
But the Bible does not say that.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't tell you.
He's baptizing
he just
Jordan
shows
River. Why? For what reason? How did he know how to do it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm just going to go straight to the proverbial jugular here because it'll help frame everything. And I say proverbial because a lot of it has to do with sacrifice, and that's the jugular cutting act, right? But I want to go straight to the heart of the issue. So know that my journey led me so intricately and detailed on so many pieces that we're going to cover, but it led me to this core central fact, which is really at the heart of the thesis of the film and of my kind of belief on the material and how it relates to the little season and the Nephilim and everything. And it comes down to who were the Nazarenes, which is essentially going to get to the heart of how did John the Baptist get this information. I found through studying the Dead Sea Scroll material, talking to biblical scholars, and then beginning to read the church fathers. If you're familiar, you're Catholic or Orthodox, or you're none of that?
Non-denominational.
Okay.
I just believe in Jesus Christ. I don't go to church. I'm done with church.
Okay. But have you ever read like the church fathers or looked into any of that? Okay. So neither had I. Being raised Protestant, we don't do any of that. We don't look at church fathers. We don't look at anything. But if you're Catholic or especially Orthodox, they really study the church fathers and their catechumen.
Jesus said there is only one Father that is in heaven.
Right.
And when they say that they're the fathers and they want others to call them fathers, that's a big red flag for me.
100%. I agree with you. And what's lost by not at least looking at it, just in my personal opinion, is forget calling them fathers, because I agree. They have all kinds of problems too. They're human beings. And a lot of the stuff that they're saying is inaccurate, in my opinion.
Can you please take that off?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
The chain? Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I'll just do this because it's actually irremovable.
Okay.
So the church fathers, they're orating a lot of the early church history and what's happening, and they're what they call heresiologists, a lot of them. So they're patroned with the goal to demand and declare who the heretics are. So the people who are saying their own personal perspective on what the story of Jesus was and the mission and the sectarians and everything, they're removing and saying, oh, those are heretics, those are heretics, those are heretics. Only this path of the Orthodox or ultimately Catholic or whichever way you believe church, the Roman empirical religion, this is what we believe, and everything else is heresy. And when you look at the arch heresiologist of them all, he's a church father named Epiphanius. He wrote a book called the Panorama, which is the most extensive book against the heresies. And it's split into 3 parts.
What century is this? First or second?
This is 3rd going into the 4th century. And he writes the Jewish heresies, he calls them, which is like basically, all the sectarians of the Hebrew faith or whatever. He's got the pagan section or the Greco-Roman kind of heresies. And then he's got essentially the Christian or the Gnostic heresies, basically. And he's condemning all of them and giving the reasons why. Well, when you look at his breakdown of the Hebrew faith, the Jewish section, he lists the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Herodians, the Himero-Baptists, and the Nazarenes as a sect of the Hebrew faith before Jesus, okay? And what he says is, we know who the Pharisees and the Sadducees are. They're opponents to Jesus, clearly, in the scripture. Himero-Baptist is just a word that means perpetual baptizers, that they baptize, and they believe in that as a kind of atonement type practice or ritual. And then when he goes on to speak about the Nazarenes, they come after the Himero-Baptists, and it says that they're a sectarian order that kind of builds off of this Himero-Baptist and this other side stream. And what it says, here's the specific description, and you can look it up too. It's Epiphanes' Panarion 18. He says that these Hebrews were just like the rest in almost every way, except they had one key difference. They would not offer sacrifice. They believed it was unlawful to do so, and they wouldn't consume the flesh either. They believed that was unlawful to do so. They believed in all the patriarchs from Adam, through Noah, all the way Abraham, all of them. But they believed that these traditions, the sacrificial traditions, had been forged into their story, that this was a priestly construct to create the temple cult, essentially, of Jesus's time. And that was to be totally rejected. And so this is a sect before the time of Jesus called the Nazarenes. Now, this raises a lot of questions like, wait a minute, but wasn't it just Jesus? Wasn't he a Nazarene because he was from Nazareth? Wasn't it just Jesus of Nazareth, right?
I know that, yeah.
But here's the issue with that, and this is a big revelation for the film, and something that just blew my mind when I found out about it. In our text, we always say Jesus Christ, or we have, our common terms of how we refer to him. Some people say Yeshua, and they try to get to the, real Hebrew name. But the most common designation of Jesus in the text is Jesus of Nazareth. All over the text, every time he's referred to as Jesus of Nazareth in our English text. But if you go back to the Greek, it's not Jesus of Nazareth. And in fact, you can check the New American Standard Bible or the ESV, but definitely the New American Standard. They're the most kind of accurate English translation in terms of going by the letter, to even to the point where certain sentences become clunky because they're trying to be so accurate to the Greek. It'll translate it as Jesus the Nazarene or Jesus the Nazarean, because in the Greek it's Jesus Nazarios, which is a sectarian designation. And in fact, Nazarios, the vowel in the Greek word, complicates any derivation of it coming from the town of Nazareth. It's a sectarian title, and it doesn't actually connect to the linguistic usage of Nazareth, which is the town.
So these two words have no connection.
Right. The connection would be their root word, but it's not like the Nazarenes.
Nazarenes that did not come from Nazareth.
No. And here's the big question is, we talk about this in the film, there's no historical record of a town named Nazareth until like 200 AD or later, like 200 years almost after Jesus' death, in church record. And then you go into the secular record and it gets even farther and even later, but there's no town by this name. Josephus, the famous Jewish historian at the time of Jesus, he lists this extensive list of all the villages and cities all around Galilee to the smallest little hamlets, but he doesn't mention Nazareth.
So where was he born then?
So this is the question.
He was born in Bethlehem, obviously, but his dad was from.
And that's the other thing, is there's so much, when you even look in the Gospels, he's born in Bethlehem, but then he moves to Nazareth, but he goes to Egypt, and there's so many different narratives that you have to kind of like parse out and make sense of. But what I'm getting at is, to this day, the town where Nazareth is, our modern day Nazareth, there is an archaeological dig there that can prove that there was a first century hamlet and people living there at that time. But it's not like there's some inscription on the pottery that says Nazareth, this is the town of Nazareth. It could have been named Nazareth at the time of Jesus. It could have been. But the question is, was Jesus called a Nazarene because he was from Nazareth? Or was Nazareth called Nazareth because Nazarenes lived there? And when you look at the ancient record, you've got Pliny the Elder, who is writing in the 1st century using census data all the way back to like 200, even 300 BC. And he writes about the tetrarchy of the Nazarini, a whole kingdom of Nazarenes in southern Syria down into the Transjordan, which is where Jesus' ministry mainly was, in the Transjordan, that he goes up towards Syria for at the foot of Mount Hermon, which gets into some of the Nephilim stuff and the gates of Hades and all of this. But his whole ministry is there. He's known as a Galilean too. He gets accused of that. And
Nothing good comes from Galilee, right?
well, it says nothing good comes from Nazareth,
Nazareth, not
actually. But in our earliest record of the Gospel of Mark in Greek, and then even before that, the records of Marcion, who created the first New Testament, even though he's a Gnostic and he's a heretic, the earliest terminology used for the town of Nazareth is Nazara. And when you look at Julius Africanus, he talks about Nazara as a whole region with towns in it. So it's a region. In even Isaiah, it refers to the Galilee of the Gentiles, or, across the Jordan, that the Messiah will come from across the Jordan, from the Galilee of the Gentiles. So when you look into the historical record, there seems to be this Nazarene sectarian designation, which maybe even had a political designation at that time, given the work of Pliny that I mentioned, and others that we can cover as well. But it's this whole Galilean region where this sectarian order lived. And that's what Epiphanius says in the Panoraion that I mentioned, where he talks about how they didn't offer sacrifice, they didn't eat flesh, they believed these were forgeries. He says that they lived in Bashan, which is the whole northern Transjordan area, Gilead, and up into Coele, Syria, Hollow, Syria, the same area that Pliny is describing, the Nazarini, the Tetrarchy, which is the Latin transliteration of Nazarene. So then I'm like, whoa, okay. So there's this data showing this Nazarene sectarian designation, this, what a lot of people and biblical scholars nowadays would call Essene type Judaism, or Essene type Hebrew faith. Have you heard of the Essenes?
No. What is it?
So Josephus, Philo, many of the early church fathers, again, they talk about these Essenes, which is essentially a blanket term for this whole movement of the Hebrew faith that isn't Pharisee and isn't Sadducee. They live in the Transjordan area, most of them. They're into baptism, so now we're getting into where did this come from. They build their own mikvahs, or they baptize in the rivers, and they practice the Hebrew faith, but what they believe is like a restored version of it. They don't want anything to do with the temple cult, the Sanhedrin, any of that. And they end up kind of writing a lot of the texts that get collected at Qumran. So you've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
So the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in caves in Qumran next to the Dead Sea. And most scholars will say this is kind of an Essene encampment. Now, again, Essene is kind of a broad term because there's many subsects, like Nazarenes being one of them. But then they had the Essenes, and they had, these subsectarian, just like how Protestant is a big term, but there's all these different types, right? So Essene became this blanket term, and, John the Baptist, scholars will tell you that he's point for point an Essene. Like they will say that he's a Nazarite type Essene, and that his baptizing and living ascetically out in the wilderness with minimal clothing, and even his diet, which we'll get into, match all the ascetic qualities of these Essene type sects. And even what he's saying about repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which is, what Jesus ultimately picks up with his gospel ministry, that this is a very Essene type, eschatological claim that these Essenes are talking about. So Jesus essentially, when you look at it from this framework, he's still 100% an outlier. And the message that he brings is a completion and a fulfillment and taking something to the next step. But we're just kind of, or at least I was led to believe, that he just happens to be from a town called Nazareth. It's just a podunk place, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that he came, to deliver the good news. And we don't get any of this historical data that there was potentially a literal people that he came from. And then how not only was it John the Baptist of him, but it continues after him. And we have this whole movement of James the Just, the brother of Jesus, which we talk about in my film, and how the baton was actually passed to him, not necessarily Paul and Peter, the way the church will tell you that he was the true leader of the movement after Jesus, along with then his successor, Simeon, for quite some time, alongside other movements that were forming in the Pauline epistles and some of that. And Peter was as well. But there's this whole thread of this council of the Nazarenes in Jerusalem and what they stood for. So now, all that to say, Jesus overturns the temple sacrifices. And I can even prove to you in our Gospels, we'll get into it, it's the big revelation of our film of literally what Jesus said and how we've misinterpreted his words from the Hebrew and how detrimental it's been to our understanding of what Jesus was doing that day at the temple. But before we even get there, just to show you, and I know it's a lot of information, so stop me at any point if you want to ask a question or if you want to particularly go into one of the citations and nail it down and get the proofs there. But like the Nazarenes are described in Epiphanius' writing, they rejected sacrifice and wouldn't eat flesh. James the Just, the brother of Jesus, who all the earliest church fathers admit is the leader, even though they don't want him to be. They admit it polemically, where they say, like, don't follow James and his way in a way that they call them Judaizers, and they have all these terms for them, right?
And Catholics even reject that Jesus had brothers and sisters, right?
100%. So they go as far as to say that not only did Mary, was she a virgin before Jesus, but she's a virgin after, and these are just brothers in the spirit, or maybe they're half-brothers from Joseph or whatever. They have all these different theories. But
it says in the Bible that James is his brother. Mm-hmm. Come on.
100% it says it's his brother. Now, we have all these attestations that we can get into about how James is meant to lead the movement after Jesus' crucifixion. But one thing that we miss is, just like John the Baptist, in the first couple of sentences of describing him in the gospel, it describes what he wears and his diet, right? Locusts and honey, and he's wearing the camel skin or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's how he's described. Similarly, James the Just, the brother of Jesus, in over 5 different attestations from church history to Josephus to the early church fathers, they describe him specifically immediately by what he wears in his diet. They say that he only wears linen and that he never ate flesh from birth, wholly from his mother's womb, it says, never eating flesh and never drinking wine. Meaning Mary, according to these sources, raised him that way, to not consume flesh and to not consume alcohol, similar to the Daniel fast, right? The Daniel plan, right? But not just a fast, but a lifelong commitment, according to all these sources. One of them being Hegesippus, the 1st century Nazarene, is where this source is coming from. So when you think about that, it's like, okay, well, whoa, okay, that's starting to confirm this data on James the Just sounds a lot like this pre-Jesus sectarian Nazarene group. And Jesus is known as the Nazarene. In fact, in the Gospel of John, above his head on the crucifix, it says there's a sign, right? Written in all the languages that Pontius Pilate puts there. Jesus Christ, King of the Jews. Or I'm sorry, Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. And that designation above his head, the Nazareos, is the sectarian title. It's like they're trying to let people know he's a Nazarene, right? So we've talked about James. Let's go back to John, because you asked about John earlier. Where did he learn this stuff? Well, like I said, John is mentioned as, in the Gospels, as eating locusts and honey and wearing a garment of camel's skin or whatever, right? But here's what's interesting. Is there's a massive early church tradition, when you look all throughout the data, that was a mistranslation, honey, locusts and honey, that it's actually...
Locusts, guys.
Yeah, it's bugs.
It's bugs.
It's bugs.
This is what the WF wants us to eat now in 26.
They want us to eat the bugs.
We want to be like John the Baptist, please, eat insects.
And
thank you.
That goes even deeper in a moment if we get to the point of talking about Genesis 9, because I know everyone listening is going to be thinking ahead and they're going to be like, well, wait a minute. So he basically is saying, Jesus is saying be a vegan or vegetarian, or that these Nazarenes were. But what about Genesis 9? And God gave us animals for food after the flood and this and that. We'll talk about that, and it actually comes back to the bug point. So we'll get there.
So misinterpretation of the word.
So misinterpretation of the word. It's the honey locust not locusts and honey. So the honey locust is the carob pod, the carob bean, which grows all over the Jordan River area where John the Baptist was baptizing. Still to this day in the Levant is known as St. John's bread. That's what it's literally called. And in our modern packaged foods, you might see the ingredient locust bean gum. That comes from the carob pod.
It's what's honey locust?
Yeah, honey locust. Honey locust is a type of So that's going to say native to North America because this is a variety.
Deciduous tree native to North America, known for its large branched thorns on wild varieties, feathery foliage, and sweet edible seed pods.
Right. But to now this day, the term honey locust is specified to the Native American version, but it's a carob bean. So if you look at it, it's carob. Type in St. John's bread.
St. John's bread.
Look, carob bean. So,
Mm-hmm.
and if you maybe just go to the actual like, the articles and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
see it's carob,
Carob. Mm-hmm.
right?
Locust tree, not to be forgotten, African locust bean.
Yeah, locust tree, right? So why? Because it looks like a locust living out there, but it's sweet like honey. It's sweet.
Yeah, because when I was reading that verse, I was like, locust and honey. So how did he catch those locusts? And then he...
He's dipping them in honey. Like, what's going on here?
Like chips or what?
Right. And so there's all of this data, too, that they're talking about the different translations of this and how it winds up becoming locusts and honey in our Greek Gospels. But one key point that we'll get to is all of the church fathers mention, like 12 plus church fathers mention or admit, again, not wanting to admit this, that there's an earlier Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, they call it, before the Greek Gospels. So in biblical scholarship, we know we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but really in biblical scholarship, they know Mark is probably the earliest Greek Gospel, and Matthew and Luke are using Mark as a source, but other sources.
By the way, I always wondered, I have never ever heard of, let's say, a Palestinian or a Jewish person from that region that has a name of John, Mark, Matthew.
Right. Yeah. So
these are not the real names.
Yeah. So Matthew, how do you see it in Hebrew? It's like Mattiyahu or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but yeah, he would have been,
It's like Yeshua and Jesus. That's how they translated them. Okay.
Yeah, he had more of an Aramaic or Hebrew type name, right? But 12 or more church fathers attest to this earlier Hebrew gospel supposedly literally penned by Matthew, which actually makes sense because in the Greek gospels it says that John and Peter, that they were agrammatos, meaning they didn't even know how to write. But Matthew is a tax collector and being able to pen and having to take notes, he would have been able to write these sayings down. And the earliest account we have is from Papias, and a lot of apologists and people who defend the faith will use this as a reference of a really early attestation of the sayings of Jesus, because it says that Papias says that Matthew wrote down the oracles of the Lord in the Hebrew language. So like just the sayings, maybe not the full narrative structure that we have in our Gospels, but the stuff that he said. And Jerome, the church father who supposedly created the Latin Bible, which is the common Bible, and made it accessible to the common man, when before that only the elites were reading the Bible and the priests, and they were orating it. Jerome admits that it's the gospel written by Matthew in the Hebrew, or he says Chaldean or Aramaic language. So it's the Aramaic Matthew, basically. And he says believed to be the authentic Matthew. And it's the gospel that the Nasarenes and the Ebionim use. He specifies. Now that term Ebionim is important. Ebionim is the Hebrew word for poor, as in blessed are the poor. Mm-hmm. And remember in the Gospels or in Acts, Paul is told to remember the poor, right? Mm-hmm. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we talked about earlier, this collection where the Essene text came, there's this designation throughout the text of the congregation of the Ebionim, the congregation of the poor, the church of the poor. Why is it called that? Because they held everything in common, which is what the Gospels and ultimately Acts talks about, is how these early church groups, they were kind of not communists, but they were communal, meaning they brought their belongings together, kind of like Jesus and the rich young ruler when he says, follow the 10 commandments. And he says, well, I've followed all of those. So now what? He says, well, if you really want to be top in the kingdom, sell everything and give it to the poor, right? He says that, and come and follow me. That's a lot of scholars say that that's actually him saying, bring your belongings to the communal church so that we can all, build our wealth together as a church, because at that time it was a way to get around Roman taxation. So it was essentially...
It sounds better.
Right. It's the way that nowadays you have all of these people that are trying to start their own tax havens of different kinds, even down to like in the techie crypto world or whatever. People want to get, their own private land and get off the grid and avoid taxes and all that. So it's another way that potentially that they were coming together to avoid the thumb of Rome out in the wilderness, where they can do and get away with that sort of thing. So these are some of the theories that different scholars have on this. But
so even back then they were trying to avoid IRS.
Yeah. And, Jesus did, in our Gospels, he says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's. But again, it's like, to them, they weren't even wanting to participate at all in that system, meaning, give the money back and just don't have anything to do with it. Let's build our own, communal, almost like the modern day idea of a kibbutz in a way, but not, there's problems with the modern kibbutzes. So back to the cherub, though, what we have John the Baptist being described eating this fruit, living off the land. And why I brought up the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew is in one of the attestations from Epiphanius, the church father who I mentioned wrote about the Nazarenes. He also writes about the Ebionim, who I mentioned. And he says that they use exclusively this Hebrew gospel. And he calls it a mutilated gospel, meaning he believes that they altered it, because it says things in it that are different than our Greek Gospels. One of the things is it says that John the Baptist, that in our Greek Gospel, the word akritis, you can look this up, it's the Greek word for locust, but that there's a difference in the letters, so it becomes honey cake. And it's meant to be similar to the manna in the wilderness that the Israel, because it tastes like cakes dipped in honey is the way that manna is described. So it's similar to this idea of like a carob sweet. Maybe he was using the carob to make little cakes in the wilderness or whatever, but they had this tradition in the Hebrew gospel. Also, or go ahead.
So that Hebrew Gospel of Matthew was written by Matthew prior to him
you can look
writing the quote unquote the real gospel.
Well, our Gospels, the Greek Gospels, are all attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Mm-hmm. But there's no biblical scholar, and even a lot of the church fathers admit that there's no actual, that these people aren't actually penning them, that they're penned in their name, some of them. But not a single modern scholar believes that Matthew literally wrote the Greek Matthew, that Luke literally wrote the Greek Luke, that John literally wrote. It says that John is a grammatos, like I said, and that he can't even write. I think the church tradition is that Polycarp wrote down what John was orating, right? So it's like an oral tradition.
It's like Mark did with the Peter, right?
Exactly, yes. Supposedly. That's another conversation.
Because Mark was not one of those 12 apostles. Correct?
Right, he's not a 12, and neither is Luke, right? He's supposed to be the traveling companion to John. And we can get into all of that too. But before we even get there, what we do know is, again, over 12 plus church fathers attest to this Hebrew or Aramaic Matthew before any of the Greek Gospels that literally was penned by him, they say, was written by Matthew. And here's what's interesting. Like I said, Papias says he preserved the oracles of the Lord.
And Papias is who?
He's one of the earliest church fathers. Like, we don't even have his writings. We just have later church fathers referring to his writings and saying, oh, he said this, he said this.
Is he mentioned in the Bible?
No. But he was, when would he have been? I think he would have been somewhere around, like, you can look it up, 130, 150.
How do you spell Papias?
Yeah, Papias.
How is it?
Papias, early church father.
Early church father.
Yeah.
Papias of Hierapolis was
60 to 130, yeah.
Early 2nd century Greek apostolic father, 60 to 130 AD. Mm-hmm.
Right.
He's a bishop in modern Turkey.
And if you want to look it up too, you can say Papias, Hebrew Gospel of Matthew.
Papias, Hebrew Gospel of Early Christian Bishop Papias is the source of the Hebrew Gospel hypothesis. He famously wrote that the Apostle Matthew compiled the Logia, sayings of Jesus, in the Hebrew language, and each person translated or interpreted them as best they could.
Right. So check this out. So like I said, that's our earliest attestation, but we've got Jerome, we've got Eusebius, the father of church history, all the church fathers, 12 or more of them, attesting to this Hebrew gospel, and that it was the earliest one used by the Nazarenes and the Ebionim. And then Epiphanius, when he's talking against the Ebionim, he calls them Ebionites, which is, kind of like a Latin to Greek kind of transliteration of their name. But he says that they have this Hebrew gospel, but he calls it a mutilated gospel because it has John the Baptist eating these honey cakes instead of locusts. But then he also says what she's furious about, that it has these two lost sayings of Jesus in it. And that they are Jesus stating, I have come to abolish the sacrifices. Unless you cease sacrificing, wrath will not cease from you. And then separately, I have no desire to eat the flesh of Passover, of the Passover lamb. That it's got these two, and he riffs on them talking about how they're basically, they're deluded and they've mutilated the gospel and they're vegetarians or whatever. But when you learn what he's and other church fathers are saying about the Nazarenes rejecting animal sacrifice, you get this understanding of the mistranslation of John and what he's consuming and wearing. And then James, the brother of Jesus, who leads the movement after him, who's abstaining from flesh from birth. And then you hear this saying that supposedly in this Hebrew Matthew that they're all saying as the original. Jesus is saying his mission, other than proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of heaven, repent, it's here, is condemning the one major thing that's stopping the kingdom of heaven from manifesting, the temple cult. I've come to abolish the sacrifices. Lest you cease sacrificing, wrath will not cease from you. I have no desire to eat the flesh of Passover. Now we've got a framing where we can talk about this temple cleanse incident again, okay?
But what is the problem with the animal sacrifice? They were just slaughtering animals, eating them. What's the problem with it?
Okay, so...
Aside from it's not humane.
Right. Which we can talk about some of the ethical implications as well, but staying with the scripture, like I mentioned, the Genesis narrative starts with the created order and climaxes with it being a paradise that's completely devoid of slaughter, death, predation, period. And in fact, most people will say, well, God gave us dominion over the animals. Like, what's the big deal? And that's what I said forever until I started to research this. But what we don't realize is dominion is first mentioned and granted in Genesis 1:26 through 28. And it says that God gives us dominion over the fish of the air, the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts of the earth, etc. And then immediately following it, it concludes in Genesis 1:28. The next verse is Genesis 1:29, that it's a plant-based paradise.
28 to 29. Okay. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Genesis 1:29. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Correct.
Right. So clearly dominion, as laid out in scripture in Genesis, is not a dominion that includes slaughtering or exploiting animals for food. It's got another food source for us. And in fact, the word dominion, this is New International, but the rule over the fish, the seed, this is all the dominion language. And that word dominion is yuridu. And when you look at the root of yuridu, the word that has been told to us for centuries, if you look into the scholarship, it comes from the root word rada, which means to rule, to press down, to dominate, almost like a tyrannical king over the population that he conquers, right? However, the word rada, the Hebrew root, actually doesn't match the first three letters of yiridu. It's different. The clefs and the way that it points is different. The true root is yarad. You can even hear it in my English, the way I say it, yarad, yiridu. That's the true root. And the word yarad means to lower oneself in service to. And it's used in descriptions of like God lowering himself to take care of us. And similarly, we know that dominion that we have is like the dominion that God has over us, or that parents have over their children throughout Scripture. Yet we're not like dominating and killing and eating our children, and we certainly hope God doesn't do that to us. What?
Not anymore?
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, I mean, unless you're in Epstein files, I guess, or whatever.
Bro, it's Hollywood right next to it.
I know, right. But the point is original dominion is this climactic Genesis 1:29, and then 1:30, like I said, is even a diet of plant-based for animals where there's no predation even amongst animals. And that's the conclusion of the creation narrative. And God says it was good. This is good, that this order is the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, but then the fall happened.
But then the fall happens. And so once the fall happens, you get this rapid succession or digression down to the time of the flood of Noah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot we could talk about in there, but let's just keep on the main points. You get to the time of the flood of Noah when violence and corruption filled the earth, right? Now we're getting into Nephilim land, okay? So in Genesis 6, right, this is the closest parallel that we have to the deeper material of like Enoch, where it really gives description of the fallen angels coming and breeding with human women and all of this. But before even getting to that, let's just look at Genesis 6. It says that the main reason the earth is cleansed is because it had become filled with violence and corruption, is the way that it's translated. Now, that word corruption is the Hebrew word shakath, or it's sometimes destruction or to destroy, but corruption is another way that it's translated. Violence is Hamas, like the, over in...
Really?
Yeah. The word violence in Hebrew is Hamas, and destruction is shakath, okay? Now, shakath has the same Hebrew root as shoket and shashita. We can look all this up too if you want. Shoket is the priest who slits the throat of the animal in sacrifice. Shakita is the process of doing it. The shakita is the cutting of the jugular and bleeding the animal out for the altar and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So shakath is a verb form with the root of this. So it's the earth had become full of violence and slaughter of creatures, period, right? Is the way that Genesis 6 is describing it. When we get to the Hebrew underneath our English, we just miss that. We don't know. We don't realize that's what it's saying. But let me make it even more clear for you. Let's jump to the Enochian parallel, right? When the fallen angels have come to the earth and they're populating and everything's getting devolved into this state before the flood. It says in Enoch 7:14, pull this up real quick, type in Enoch 7:14.
First Enoch, right?
Yes. Which we know is, some people contest how legit is Enoch, but even biblical scholars know First Enoch is a legit early text that Jesus and, the movement would have been referencing even. So check this out. So I'm so glad you pulled this up. The Ethiopic, the Ge'ez, and the Aramaic. Mm-hmm. So look here on the left. It says, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind, and they began to sin. So there's the word sin. They began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. And the earth had, so this is the description of what's happening. Mm-hmm. Now that on the left is, I forget that Charles, he's going from the Greek on the left here, right? Now scroll down on the other side to 14. This is the Ge'ez Aramaic. They began to injure beasts, reptiles, and fishes, and to eat their flesh, the animals, one after the other, and drink their blood. So what we see is in the older Aramaic Ge'ez tradition, the original Enoch, it's pointing to the consumption of the animals is the sin. Whereas in the later Greek, it tries to make it about cannibalism, that the Nephilim are eating each other, okay? So again, here's another one of these shifts, these subtle shifts of what happens. But bottom line, what I'm getting at is these early, the Nazarene tradition and the Ebionim tradition. And we have some of the early texts that we can get into, like the Clementine literature. Clement was more likely the true traveling companion of Peter, who's running around listening to Peter and writing down. There's this group of writings called the Clementine Recognitions and Homilies. Some people will say that they're late and that they're pseudepigraphica and they have all these reasons, but scholars know that there's a core, like the Travels of Peter, the Ascents of James, they all go back to the 1st century, that they were written in Aramaic. Peter talks about this. Peter talks about in the Clement writings that the fallen angels came and taught man to slaughter and slay beasts and eat them and consume them and all of this, and that this was a part of the fall of humanity. And we know that in our gospel, or in our Tanakh, I guess, when you go through the story of Noah, that Noah himself, if you follow the lineage of the righteous ones, that they were not eating animals. It's not until after the flood, right, that Noah's given permission to eat animals. So it's rendered, which I told you we'll talk about. It's more of a conversation around bugs.
Okay,
But
so the first animal sacrifice occurs after the fall. Cain and Abel. Cain brings the wrong sacrifice, but this is the first mention of the sacrifice, and we have no idea why was it introduced in the first place.
Yeah. So,
and it says that God was not pleased with Cain's sacrifice.
Yeah.
Did Cain know how to do sacrifice correctly or not?
So the deeper reading that we know, just as Christians raised in church, it's actually a lot less about what the sacrifice is, and it's more about the heart of Cain and Abel, right? That Abel's got a righteous heart. He's coming before the Lord in a certain way. Cain is
It
kind
doesn't
of
say that in the Bible.
It doesn't say it, and I can get to the reason why this has been so twisted and how there's been massive, again, manipulation with this story. But before even getting there, I'm just talking about the classic story as it's rendered to us. Even though it doesn't say it,
Correct.
Many people orate or expand upon the story and
Correct.
say, oh, well, you know, Cain just was lazy and came and didn't have the true heart of sacrifice before God and wanting to bring his best or whatever.
Show-
And so, it's not
me
there.
the Bible.
Right. But what we do know is it says that Abel brings the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof, is the way it's rendered in like the King James. But there's no mention of an altar. There's no mention of a killing. There's no mention of blood. There's none of that. And in fact, the fat thereof is a Hebrew word that's kind of, it goes back to lanolin. It's the fat rendered from the wool of the sheep. It's still to this day used. And that this fat thereof of the firstling of the flock, because there's no mention, or you could even say maybe there's some kind of scapegoat type ritual sacrifice, because you know there's a scapegoat ritual where they take the animal and they actually let it loose into the wilderness to Azazel, which we'll talk about.
Never heard of it.
You never heard of this?
No.
Okay, so at the time, you know, Yom Kippur, it's a famous Jewish holiday where they basically take one goat and they sacrifice it, and they take another one and they release it to the wild. You never heard of this?
No.
So the story of Jesus and Barabbas is meant to be kind of a Yom Kippur moment where Jesus is taken to sacrifice and Barabbas is let free like the scapegoat.
I see you like the episode. How do I know that? Because you're 1 hour in and you're still watching the episode. But you know what? I can see that you did not tap the like button and you did not subscribe to the channel. So please do it right now. It will take you like 3 seconds. Like this video right now and tap subscribe button right now as well. And now let's get back to the podcast.
But here's what's interesting. You can look it up. Just type in scapegoat ritual, ancient scapegoat ritual. It'll tell you that they give the animal to Azazel.
Ancient scapegoat ritual is a symbolic purification ceremony originating in the Torah's book of Leviticus. During Yom Kippur, the high priest laid hands on a goat, confessing the community's sins to transfer their guilt onto the animal. The goat was then banished into the wilderness to carry away the impurities.
Now type in Azazel next to it because it'll just pull it up faster.
In the ancient scapegoat ritual, centered around Azazel, was a sacred purification rite in Judaism described in the book of Leviticus, performed annually. Okay.
Right. Now type in Azazel.
Azazel is fallen angel.
A fallen angel from Enoch.
The ritual involved the high priest casting lots over 2 goats, one for the Lord to be sacrificed and one for Azazel to be cast into the wilderness.
Right.
It says in the Leviticus, Azazel.
Yeah. Unbelievable, right? So Azazel is one of the main fallen angels. He's the one that teaches warfare, I believe. He teaches how to make...
is mentioned in the Bible? Yes, it's mentioned in the Bible, specifically in Leviticus 16. It appears during the instructions of Yom Kippur.
Mm-hmm. So if you type in Azazel, supernatural entity, In the book of Enoch, Azazel is depicted as a powerful fallen angel who taught humanity how to make weapons and corrupt the earth. There's that word corruption again, like the slaughter, right?
Wait a minute. So God commands in the book of Leviticus how to do the right sacrifice?
Yes, supposedly.
With 2 goats.
Yeah.
One for the Lord and one for Azazel?
Azazel, yes.
Yahweh teaches that?
Yes.
How did I miss this?
I know. It's been there the whole time. Yeah. It's been there the whole time. And so my point being, and we'll come back to this Azazel point because I can tell you're stoked on it. There's more to say there, but I just wanted to wrap up the Cain and Abel story. So there is an argument too that some will make that Abel's sacrifice is more like this scapegoat type ritual.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. So this is the Day of Atonement, Leviticus 16. There's no word like Azazel. No mention.
Then he's to take 2 goats and present them before the Lord. And
There's a goat.
yeah.
Okay, everything with the goat. Here it is. He is to cast lots for the 2 goats, one for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat. Aaron shall bring the goat whose lot falls for the Lord and sacrifice it for a sin offering. But the goat chosen by lot as a scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to be used for making atonement. Okay, yeah, so no Azazel.
Yeah, okay, so maybe the word Azazel isn't literally in Leviticus, but
maybe it's in the Jewish oral tradition.
Yeah, it's in like the mission of the Talmud.
Azazel, angel.
Yeah.
It's nonsense.
Yeah, so maybe it's Talmudic or Mishnah or one of these, but it's commonly known that it's Azazel. And they'll tell you, oh, Azazel is just an ancient word meaning wilderness, is what they'll say.
No, it's not.
No, it's 100% the Enochian demon, fallen angel who taught mankind to make warfare. And all this is going to come together, by the way. This whole thesis, all of this
is a prominent figure in ancient religious texts, best known for the apocryphal Book of Enoch as a leader of the Watchers, fallen angels who had descended to earth, took women wives, and corrupted mankind.
And look, what he taught was he was known for introducing humanity to forbidden arts and technologies and how to forge swords, knives, shields, essentially making modern warfare weapons.
Thank you, Azazel, very much. You helped humanity so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so what we'll get to here is whether you look at it scripturally or whether you look at it anthropologically, slaughtering, we're really hurting animals, hurting culture. We talk about this in the film, is deeply tied to warfare. So let's talk about it anthropologically first, and then we'll come back to the Azazel story. But essentially, before herding culture, man was scavenger-gatherer. Now, I'm talking in anthropological language. I'm not talking biblical, by the way. I'm not saying I even believe the language being used. I'm just saying the way that modern anthropologists would describe this. In fact, Guns, Germs, and Steel, I think, or Germs, Guns, and Steel, the famous Nobel Prize-winning book Jared Diamond wrote, lays this out, that before herding culture, man was essentially scavenger-gatherer, mostly scavenging plant foods, but then occasionally maybe scavenging some dead animal foods, very rarely hunting, actually, because it's so energy intensive to go out and run and try to chase down an animal, and then you have to build tools and do everything. But bottom line, primarily plant foods. All the science points to that. But the point is then at a certain point, man develops herding, starts domesticating sheep and goats. And again, if you look anthropologically in the record, they say that the Levant is where this happened, like the Middle East. Iran is where the first goats and sheep start to be domesticated as animals that you keep for probably initially wool and these kinds of things, maybe milk, and then eventually they start killing them and eating them. And what happens is, in the anthropological understanding, once the animals are herded together and then raised to be killed and eaten, they become a system of wealth. So even today, and I'm not anti-capitalist by any means, I want to make that clear, but the word capital literally means head of cattle, head of livestock. That's what the word means. Because the ancient version, the more you had of a herd, the more wealthy you were. And then you get the lordship, the idea of the kind of first tyrannical oligarchical type leaders of these tribes that would have the more herds or wealth they had was the more animals that they had. Then animals are incredibly resource intensive, herding animals. Like goats, they eat everything. Like if you've ever heard of someone putting a goat in their backyard, they destroy all the plants and everything, they eat everything. So they are eating and desertifying their area just constantly with the resources, and eventually they run out of resources. So then they got to go get their neighbors' resources. So now we have a reason for the first war.
That's why you have to kill it and eat it.
Yeah, kill it and eat it. But then even still, the more you kill them, the faster, the more they're mating, the more you're inseminating, and all of this. You're creating machines that essentially eat up all your resources, your water, your this, your that. I mean, there's a argument that the Levant is so desertified because of herding, but that's a whole other conversation. But the point being, once resource scarcity happens, you then have to go get the neighboring tribes' resources, and you take the tools that you built to herd or maybe even hunt before, and you turn that towards your fellow man to now go kill the men and take the spoils and the herds, and now increase your wealth and get more resources. And then the women and children are left over as slaves. So this is the onset of slavery as well. In fact, this can be proven by the oldest word for war is from the Vedas, from Hindu culture. And it's gavasti. It comes from the ancient word for cow, goa, which is the desire for more cattle. That's what the word war was in the Vedas. Gavasti means the desire for more cattle. And in fact, you can fact check me, they mentioned this in that movie Arrival. Remember the movie Arrival? About this is a big plot point in the movie Arrival.
Means what you said?
Desire for more cattle.
Desire for more cattle. The word you're looking for, gavisti, derived from the Sanskrit root gavis. It literally translates to desire for cows. And it's a sacred animal in India, right? You can't eat it. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
In the early Vedic period, cattle were the primary measure of wealth, so disputes and battles were frequently centered around acquiring and protecting them.
And see, there you go. It's most notably in the sci-fi film Arrival. That was when it kind of became popular. She talks about it. It's a plot point of the film, without getting into all that. But essentially, yeah, our oldest, texts mention war as a desire for more cattle, as a livestock acquisition. And all of this, and I can go down this for ages, this is essentially the blueprint for the matrix that we're living in, which I call the matrix. Because we don't realize that we're born into it. We're born into this system, and we look around us and we think, oh my gosh, the system's broken. Like there's this poverty over here. There's the elites ruling over here, and this and this. But the reality is the system is actually working really well because it's this system. It's the matrix system. It's working really good for the people that benefit from it. And in this ancient model, you had from herding culture in the specialization, then you had the oligarchical, tyrannical, kleptomaniac systems that begin to develop with leaders who are doing that and then going to get the other tribe. And now it's the same system. We can get into this maybe later in the podcast that's running today. And all the elites that we're pointing our fingers at and saying this, that, and the other, it's a system that started here with the ancient warfare and herding culture that then developed into the temple sacrificial rites. And we can map this all out in our scripture and then juxtapose it with the Nazarenes and what they were doing against it. But then the sacrificial temples were essentially slaughterhouses. It was how the meat and it was a ritualized way to get the herds out to the people in mass numbers. And then eventually that's overturned. And I can prove to you, this is something we're going to have to look up because it's going to blow your mind. But the first Christians, by the name Christian, not even Nazarenes, because they were called, it was really the way, right? Acts says it was the way. Then they were called the Nazarenes. Even Paul gets accused of being a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes in Acts. But then after the Nazarenes, they eventually became called Christians, right? And that's the term today. But even the Christiani in Latin, here, let's just go ahead and do this. So look up Pliny the Elder. Pliny the Younger's letter to Trajan.
What?
Pliny the Younger's letter to Trajan.
P-L what?
P-L-I-N. It's actually Pliny, I guess. P-L-I-N-Y.
And
I always say Pliny, but I think it's Pliny.
Pliny the Elder.
The Younger.
The Younger.
Yeah.
Younger.
Letter to Trajan. Letter
to Trajan.
Yes. So framing this.
Who's he and who's Trajan?
So Pliny is a Roman kind of general, I believe. He's like an official, military official, ruling over the area, which is now modern day Turkey, kind of, during the reign of Emperor Trajan. And it's about 111, 112 AD, I think they say is when this letter was written. And why it's so important is because Christian apologists to this day who will be battling atheists saying, or mythicists even saying, oh, Christianity is just a made up religion about, some mythical figure and it was, way late and blah, blah, blah. They'll use this letter as one of the main proofs of the early existence of Christians because it's the earliest secular record of the existence of a group of Christians. 111, 112, 113 AD. So click on that, the top one, because I think the letter is probably actually going to be in there. So he's describing the Christians that have moved into his area and how he's persecuting and killing them because they're causing problems. Now, people will talk about this, like I said, apologists, but most of the time they won't actually really share what he's saying because it's pretty important regarding this Nazarene conversation. So go down a little bit. So he says, scroll up just a little bit. Up, yeah. So he says, so here it is. I participated in the trials of the Christians, and it's Christiani in Latin, right? Because he's writing in Latin. And he kind of goes on to say that he doesn't really, know too much about them because they kind of meet in secret, but he's starting to interrogate. So he says, those who I confessed, interrogated a second and a third time, threatening them with punishment. Those I persisted and I ordered executed. So he's talking about how he's executing them. And in fact, he mentions in here that he's torturing female deacons, which is huge because, right, Paul's like women can't preach in church and this and that. So there's a little bit of a deviation here from like modern Orthodox understanding of the early church. But importantly, he says, I'm trying to find this one particular part. Oh, here we go. So he talks about once he starts to torture the female deaconesses and learn about them, this is what he finds out. He says, they all, they meet on a fixed day before dawn. So you see that down below in that next paragraph. They meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsively hymns to Christ as to a God. They bind themselves by oath not to do some crime, but not to commit crimes, that being fraud, theft, adultery, not to falsify their trust. So he's essentially kind of pointing to the Ten Commandments in his own language, right? So they're swearing the Ten Commandments. And why he says not to do some crime, but to not, because he's like, they're kind of like a secret society, but secret societies usually swear to do crimes and not tell anyone, but they're swearing to not do crimes. And then he says, it was their custom then to depart and assemble again to partake of food, but ordinary and innocent food. Now that word innocent is also translated harmless food, okay? Now, the apologists that do get this far on this letter will often say the reason why it says that is because there was a rumor that Christians were cannibals because they're eating the body and the blood of Jesus. And there's this rumor that they're eating like flesh and blood, like they're cannibals, right? Or they're eating children, they're stealing the babies. There's like all these crazy, but that doesn't actually hold water, this argument. Why? Because when you go on, he says here, the truth was by torturing 2 female slaves who were called deaconesses. So there you go, female leaders, right? I discovered nothing but depraved and excessive superstition. And he's consulting Trajan about his method here of torturing them. But then he goes on to say, it is now that he's tortured them, he's cured it. That's the last word of that paragraph. He's cured the problem of the Christians. It is certainly quite clear that the temples, which had been almost deserted, have become frequented again, and that the established religious rites long neglected are being resumed, and that from everywhere sacrificial animals are coming, for which until now very few purchasers could be found. Hence, it's easy to imagine what a multitude of people can be reformed of if an opportunity for repentance is afforded. So he's saying, I'm killing all these people and I'm scaring them, and since I have, now our temples and our sacrificial animals and the shambles and the meat markets, all of this is bustling and booming again. Because when the Christians moved in, they were shutting it down, is essentially what he's saying. They're shutting down the temples, the sacrificial rites, the animals for sale for flesh, and they're eating harmless food.
So right? No demand.
Right, no demand. Now, Trajan ends up, I'm not going to go fully into this, but Trajan responds and basically gives him the thumbs up, like, good job, Pliny. I approve of your persecution and killing of the Christians and torturing of the females and all of that. But what he says is in there, one important piece is he says, once they denounce and they are proven guilty, they are to be punished with this reservation. Whoever denies that he is a Christian and really proves it, that is by worshiping our gods. So that worshiping our gods. This is kind of a funny translation here. It's not fully accurate. It should be supplication to our gods is the real word.
What does it mean?
It means sacrificing an animal. So the Christian has to prove his allegiance to Rome by sacrificing an animal in the presence of Pliny or one of his officials to prove that he's not a Christian, and only then he can live. And we have tons of evidence all through the Albigensian Crusades and the Cathars where Christians were persecuted, and if they didn't kill an animal, they were known to be Christian, and they could then live after that. It goes all the way back to stories of the Christians at the mines of Pella, that they wouldn't sacrifice animals. And really, some of this goes even back to Maccabees and some of these ancient stories of the temple period before Jesus, where they were not sacrificing and eating pork because of the kosher side of it. But this is any animal. This is any sacrificial animal. So I bring all that up to say that during this time of this timeline of herding culture, then developing into the temple sacrificial rite system that is essentially the slaughterhouse and the way to get the meat out, massive money-making operation. And in fact, the temple of Jerusalem was the foundation of the economy. Type in Jerusalem temple slaughterhouse. Type that in.
In ancient Jerusalem, the Holy Temple operated as a highly structured industrial-scale site for animal sacrifice. Located in the court of the priests, a massive altar and butchering area handled hundreds to tens of thousands of livestock daily.
Daily, right. Now go down and mention, see, particularly during major pilgrimage festivals like Passover, which is the week that Jesus turned the temple over. Passover
but
week.
Tens of thousands daily.
Daily. This is according to Josephus and, the Jewish historian. But go down. So the blood drainage, we talk about this in our film. I actually went and walked through. So it's a big reveal in our film. I went to the temple to do archaeology on some of the sites there to find any evidence of it being a slaughterhouse. And one of the big pieces was, where's all the blood go? Like, that's a lot, like tens of thousands. There's got to be some massive system or drainage here. And so I'm looking for a hole. Come to find out in the film, you'll see I'm walking through a tunnel underneath the temple, which was only excavated in like 2014 or 13 or something like that. Brand new tunnel. And then I come to find out that I'm walking through the blood tunnel. I'm walking through it.
It's that big.
It's that big to drain all the blood down to the Kidron brook, which is what separates the temple from the Mount of Olives, right? And it's where Jesus said hell was. Remember, he says Gehenna, you will be with the weeping and gnashing of teeth in Gehenna. Gehenna is the valley there that all the blood drained into, and all the bones of the animals and the dogs would come. And that weeping and gnashing of teeth is about the dogs coming to eat all the corpses and everything. And it says in historical record that there would be so much blood, it would flow down the Kidron Brook all the way down to the Dead Sea, like a river of blood. Now, go down to economic engine. This is all Reddit, though. Don't even because people might not trust Reddit. Go scroll down. There's a couple articles from like Live Science and this and that. There, just click on NBC News. Again, it's major media, but
so people don't trust Reddit, but they do trust NBC News. Come on, bro.
Yeah,
come on.
You can go either one, but I just wanted to show, like, just click on that. Animal sacrifice powered the ancient economy of Jerusalem. It was
so they were killing the livestock and they were selling the meat?
Yeah, 100%. So it's the major driver of the economy of Jerusalem. It was the only like natural resource, and people would come from all over with their animals to do this and slaughter them and eat them. And the priests eat them, and the people eat them, and they pay. There is a money issue here. Like, Jesus turned the tables of the money changers. Because they're paying taxes on the animals that are coming, and then they're paying again for the animals to eat them when they eat the flesh and all of this. It's a whole racket. But the point is that it wasn't just the money that Jesus is condemning. So now let's go back to the Gospels. In all four Gospels, we have this temple cleansing account, right? And we're told that Jesus is primarily upset with the money changers in there, ripping people off of the taxes and selling merchandise. But if I haven't proven it enough, the only merchandise for sale were animals for sacrifice. That was the merchandise. And in all four gospel accounts, the cattle dealers, the merchants, the ones dealing with the animals, they're all condemned and rebuked by Jesus first. The money changers are secondary. But in Luke's gospel, the money changers aren't even mentioned at all. It's just the cattle dealers. It's just the merchants. And what does he do in multiple gospels in the synoptics? It says he frees the doves, right? He lets the doves free. Sorry. In John's gospel, we get the clarity that he frees the oxen and the sheep. Like type in John, I think it's John 10:12 or something like that.
Gospel of John.
Gospel of John, temple cleanse.
Temple cleanse.
Yeah. John 2, oh, sorry. John 2:10. So go to the story itself. Yeah, so he makes the whip of cords. He drives them all out of the temple, the sheep and the oxen. And this is a English standard version that, you can read it in all the different versions. You can see the way that it's worded. But he drives the animals out of the temple, right? Now go to John 10:10. And type in John 10:10, type in Greek next to it, because it'll pull up Bible Hub. So click on that, the interlinear. So we know this famous verse, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? And then he goes on to say, but I have come to bring life and life abundantly, right? Look at this word kill. Go down, that he might steal, kill, click on it, thyse.
This one?
Yeah. Or, yep, thyse, go down. Go back, this is, click on under the Greek to the left.
Right here.
Or either to,
yes, right here.
Yep, go down a little bit. So I just want to show you the definition of this. Or maybe it's the one before that. Essentially, the word, click on the number next to thyse, 2380E. Go to the left, right there. Yep. Sacrifice is slaughter and sacrifice of an animal. Thuo, to kill, to sacrifice, to butcher, to offer sacrifice, offering sacrifice. So this is the first century and after usage of the word thuo, which is thyse in the particular tense that he's using it there. But he says the enemy comes to steal, slaughter and sacrifice and butcher and destroy. And remember, destroy is that word that we talked about earlier in the corruption, destruction. The earth had become full of violence and destruction or corruption is shakath. So if Jesus is speaking, and this is Greek right here, right? But Jesus is probably speaking in Hebrew or Aramaic to his people. So he could have most likely used a word like shakath, which is again pointing to the overwhelming slaughter and the slitting of the throat, the shakita and the shoket, the priest slaying the animal. And then he goes on to say, but I've come to bring life and life abundantly. And he's essentially pointing to the two ways, which in all the early Nazarene documents and even in our Gospels, Jesus talks about the narrow path to life and the wide path to destruction. It's the two ways of life and death is what he's talking about. And he says, in John, after this is John 10:10. In John 10:11, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays his life down for the sheep, right? John 10:11.
I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep.
For the sheep, right? Now, people allegorize this to him just totally talking only about the sheep or the lost sheep of Israel or the parable of the one that he goes for versus the 99, right? But you got to remember, yes, and he's also saying this in the light of Passover and the temple and all the sheep being brought for Passover, like that slaughterhouse article you pulled up showed. It said primarily Passover is when the tens to even sometimes they say hundreds of thousands, probably a blown out number, but tons of animals. He comes and he lays his life down for the sheep. So when we put that in the perspective of the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, I told you, he says in the original Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, I came to abolish the sacrifices. Unless you cease sacrificing, wrath will not cease from you. I have no desire to eat the flesh of the Passover. And you can Google those quotes if you want to confirm them. Type in Hebrew Gospel of Matthew.
Hebrew Gospel.
I came to abolish the sacrifices.
He came to abolish the animal sacrifice.
Scroll down. Type in Gospel of the Ebionites.
Gospel of the Ebionites, Jesus abolishes
sacrifice. Yep.
In the Gospel of Ebionites, Jesus explicitly declares that he has come to abolish the practice of animal sacrifices, warning that divine wrath will follow if the people do not stop.
So click show more. There's the quote. I came to abolish the sacrifices. If you cease not from sacrificing, the wrath will not cease from you.
And that Gospel of Ebionites is not written by Greta Thunberg.
No. No.
Sounds like it.
No. And then see what it says below. Strict vegetarian. The Gospel of Ebionites portrays both John the Baptist and Jesus as vegetarians. Again, like I said, Epiphanius, the church fathers, mad about it. And see, it says Jesus denies the desire to eat the Passover lamb with the disciples in this. And like I said, the church fathers are mad about this. They're like, these people have corrupted the gospel.
I'm mad about this. I was a vegan for 6 months and pescatarian for almost 3 years.
Right. Well, and so we can have all the conversations too about like literally the diet if we want, and the dietary aspect and the food and nutrition or whatever. But what I wanted to really focus in on this, and again here it talks about the temple polemic and how the early groups were against the temple and the ascents of James. Remember I talked about the ascents of James, that's in the Clementine literature, supposedly Clement following Peter around. Talks about the Christ abolishing the sacrifices and the introduction of baptism instead. So there's your answer all the way at the beginning. Baptism was an alternative to the animal sacrificial ritual. They used blood and all of this death and gore as a part of their ritual cleansing to make money off of people, essentially, is what I see the Nazarenes and Jesus were condemning. John, as a Nazarene, comes up and says, along the same lineage that he was raised in, no, come and repent. Leave your wrongs, put them behind you, be baptized, become made new again, and don't participate in this system. And he's known to be, like I said, pretty much point for point Essene Nazarene type.
Okay, then. Let's do Old Testament and kosher laws. What are those then?
So
times have changed, just like you don't have to do sacrifices once Jesus arrived and sacrificed himself as a final atonement.
So there's two ways to look at this. So for those of you who are listening,
I want a way how to look at it so I could continue eating meat. Not having a gluttony and overeating, which is the problem. I want to say the modern problem is people eat too much and too much of a fake or not good quality meat. Because if you eat a good steak, let's say, you can be full for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 hours. But if you eat like burgers from McDonald's, 30 minutes, 45 minutes after, you want to eat more and more and more.
Yeah.
So it's gluttony.
Well, let's talk about that. I do want to talk about why it's important to move in the direction of completely removing it in the same way that the Nazarenes did. But just to your point, it's a little bit anecdotal, but I haven't had animal products of any kind for 17 years, and I'm thriving and healthy, strong as I could be. And I just would argue that we don't need it. There's no need for it in the way that we think we are, or the way we think we do. And this is this matrix programming. There's been propaganda. Everyone says, like, it's funny, people talk about veganism or vegetarianism as the propaganda. You've heard probably the term vegan propaganda and all the ex-vegans and Bill
I'm
Gates.
I'm the one.
You're the
because
one.
I felt horrible being vegan, and I felt horrible being pescatarian, and I still can't get back to the levels of strength in the gym that I used to have when I was eating meat.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Daniel, who not only fasted, but abstained completely from animals. We know from the Jewish historian Josephus, he has the oration of the story of Daniel from his time in the 1st century. And he says that Daniel and his brothers abhorred the consumption of living creatures, period. That it wasn't a fast, it was the way they actually lived. And remember, he says that they were healthier, stronger, wiser than all the others.
But we don't know how much did he bench. Did he bench 25?
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Some of some of the strongest elite lifter athletes are vegan, like Patrick Baboumian. Look, Patrick Baboumian?
No, that's BS.
No,
that's the movie. What's the movie?
Game Changers.
Yeah, that's BS.
It's not
Come on.
BS.
Schwarzenegger saying he's now vegan.
Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah. Schwarzenegger is
He's a fool
close.
of it.
He's close. He flexes back and forth.
What's the name of that strongman you said?
Patrick Baboumian.
Patrick Baboumian?
Baboumian, yeah. He's probably Lithuanian. He's from your side of the world, right?
No. Baboumian, he's Armenian.
He's Armenian. Oh, there you go.
Come on.
He's Persian. Yeah, there you
Iran.
go. Yeah, super strong. Totally.
Iranian propaganda. I see it. I knew it from the very beginning that you came on the show just to get this Iranian propaganda.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. No, they're all over the place. They're all over the place. Some of my close friends are super strong, and they all eat plants. I mean, I would say for my size, and I don't really like lift more. I lift more so for health than I do for like strength or whatever, but I'm pretty strong. I've only gotten stronger.
Bro,
And
we just lost
all about-
half of our audience.
It's
Half
about-
of it. We're in America. Ribs and steaks and burgers and pizza.
But here, let me explain why this is the Matrix and why this all ties into the little season. You ready for that? Okay.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. We mentioned how Genesis 1:29 is the ideal in the Garden of Eden, right? In the old creation narrative. But now, Jesus' gospel.
When you bring me back to Eden, I'm not going to eat any meat.
Okay.
Bring me back to Eden.
But is it back to Eden or forward to the kingdom of heaven? And that's the question. Or did the kingdom of heaven already happen and we're in the little season of deception trying to understand how to return to it? So now check this out. The kingdom of heaven is Jesus' gospel. When people really when people say, well, what was the good news? All throughout the Bible, when Jesus says the good news, repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, right? Mm-hmm. That's literally the good news. Well, what is the kingdom of heaven? The quintessential kingdom of heaven chapter of scripture is Isaiah 11. So type in Isaiah 11 really quickly. So click on that. NIV, not the best translation, but we'll go with it. So starting at verse 6, it describes what the kingdom of heaven is. And it says, the wolf shall live with the lamb. And this is one of those funny, like, what do they call it? Mandela effects, where they say it was the lion should lay with the lamb, but it's been changed or something, but maybe people are remembering it differently. Anyways, the verse says, the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and the little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like the ox.
It doesn't say the lion will be happy, right?
But listen, what it does say is it says that they will neither harm nor destroy. That's that violence and destruction again, remember, like Genesis 6. Destroy is shakath right there. It's the slaughter and the slay. On my holy mountain. The holy mountain is Zion. It's the Temple Mount. It's where the slaughter was taking place at the time of Jesus. And it's also a metaphor for the people of God, the city of God, the kingdom of heaven, right? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea when this happens. So it's saying that humans will not be slaughtering, and it's saying animals will not even be slaughtering anymore, that it will return to the nature of the kingdom of heaven, okay? So that's the vision of the kingdom of heaven. It's defined by Isaiah, who I would argue is kind of the gospel of Jesus' time.
Yeah, but no human is being mentioned right here.
No, it says
only animals.
They will not harm or destroy on my holy mountain. That's referring to the humans. That's referring to the people, because at that time.
Yeah, but maybe harm and destroy each other. We're not gonna kill or hurt each other.
But destroy is shakath there. It's the slaughter of animals.
Okay, so, Isaiah 11:9 word destroy in original Hebrew.
There it is. Shakath.
Shakath. Let's do
So
meaning.
Yep.
To destroy, corrupt, ruin, or decay.
Right, but go to go to the Bible Hub there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then to batter, cast up to
destroy, corrupt, ruin, spoil.
So type in where's the actual Hebrew? Okay, see the Hebrew letters? I wish there was a way to copy so that you can compare. Because again, what you have to remember here is when you go to Bible Hub, you can't always fully trust Bible Hub because it's self-referential to the text. Mm-hmm. It's not taking the outside knowledge of the word and the usage of the word. It's only taking it within. So type in shakath at the top. Just Google, type in shakath, just copy that word.
Mm-hmm.
And now next to it, put, just remove meaning for a second. Just next to it, put shishita, S-H.
Shita?
No, it's S-H-I-T-A. S-H-E-C-H-I-T-A, I think.
S-H-E-C-H-I-T-A.
I-T-A. And then type in Shochet after that, which is S-H-O-C-H-E-T.
S-H-O-C-H-E-T.
Yeah, those are the three words with the same root. Yeah, see, there you go, Shekita. In Judaism, Shekita is the ritual slaughtering of certain mammals and birds according to kashrut. But go down, because it'll probably, in one of the articles, show you how it's tied to Shekath. Shochet, see, Shochet is the one who's doing the slaughtering. Here, go back.
I started to debate define kosher laws. Okay.
Shushita. I'm trying to figure.
Shekita is the Jewish religious and humane method of slaughtering permitted animals and poultry for food.
What we would have to do to show you is Shekath. If we put the Hebrew words.
This is described in your film.
Yes.
Okay, so guys, watch the film. Yeah. Okay,
So the point is all those words are related from the same root word, and we've come to vanillify, if that's a word.
Yeah, but isn't it cherry picking? Because it has, let's say, 5 word meanings, and you're cherry picking the ones that suits your narrative?
No, because it's all about context, right? Cherry picking is implying that you're pulling something out of context to make it mean something that you want it to.
I would say cherry picking is 5 meanings, and one of those is, let's say, corrupt, destroy, kill, and decay. And you choose, decay, I like that one.
No,
not destroy, not corrupt, but that.
But it's not about what I like, it's about what makes the most sense in context of the scripture. And that's how you know what the true meaning or usage should be. Like any biblical scholar or even just historian who's trying to understand certain texts would take, if there's a word that's in question, it's like, okay, what's the context? How is it used in other contexts? And how do we know what they're most likely saying? We've come to describe it as corruption or destruction because we have a nature, like you just said earlier, you're like, I want to pick the reading that allows me to keep eating meat.
Yeah,
right?
I was joking.
Yeah, you were joking. Yeah, but that's what we do, and I did it too. So that's the true cherry picking, is what we do is we try to cherry pick to try to make it mean a certain thing. But in the context, so go back to Isaiah 11. I think you just had it pulled up. So in Isaiah 11, what's the context? The context is non-predation. The whole point is not even animals will be preying on other animals. So they shall not hurt nor slaughter on my holy mountain. So now we have the context that what it's saying here is there's no more killing, no more slaying of animals. Now, let's bring it to Jesus. Go back up to the top of that. So this is the chief messianic prophecy. People will say Isaiah 53 and a few others, but this is really, when it comes down to it, one of the premier messianic prophecies in the Old Testament, or the prophet, should I say. And Isaiah says, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him, da, 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 da. And then it goes on to explain that when this branch comes, the kingdom of heaven will return, and it'll be just non-predation. That's how the kingdom of heaven is described. That word branch is netzer. It's where Nazarene comes from. The word Nazarene, the Nazarenes, the netzarim, it comes from that prophecy. It comes from that word, branch, the netzarim. And from the stump of Jesse, Jesse we know is a genealogy with the house of David and all of this, right? But also Epiphanius says, the one who tells us that the Nazarenes were even before Jesus, Epiphanius admits in the Panoraion, anyone can look this up, you can look it up, that before Christian, the Christians were first called Jesseans until they became the Nazarenes or the Nasareans, and then they eventually became Christians. Jessean in Greek is Esaioi. It's basically the same phonetic rendering and spelling as Essene. Remember I told you the Essenes? So in a way, it's like you've got this Essene lineage or this Essene tradition, and from it, a Nazarene branch, a sect, will grow, and they're the ones that are against sacrifice, against flesh consumption, saying it's not lawful. And actually, pull this up. Type in Panoraion. We just got to read this.
Panoraion.
It's I-O-N. Just
I-O-N.
Yep. Click on Panoraion of Epiphanius right there. Salamis. Yep. Click on that. Now type in. Oh, can you zoom in? Yeah. Keyword search Nasarean, N-A-S-A-R. That should, A-E-A-N, yeah. That should bring it up. That's good. Just go down to, it's Panoraion 18 that we can read.
Okay,
but
15
just click,
matches.
Yeah, zoom in.
I can't. This is
You
max
can't?
that I can do.
Okay.
Let's do. Can I do this? Yes, I can. Okay.
There you go. So here in the introduction, we're getting a little bit of framing about the Nasarenes, but it says, this is a good point just to note because, like I said, some people who know their church fathers or know their scriptural material, they'll say, oh, the Nazarenes were early, but they're not the same as the later Nazarenes after Jesus. They're different. But you've got the author who translated this text giving you the framing here. We can be most certain that we're hearing Epiphanes' own voice when he does, from time after time, quote scripture to prove a point. He was proficient in biblical exegesis. And a good example of this, knowing that he's telling the truth, is his manner of censure of the Nazareans' refusal to eat meat. So he talks about here how he's trying to debate them. Well, didn't Abraham offer the ram, and wasn't there a Passover? And he's trying to use the same refutations that we would bring up, right? But he goes on to explain. Click next. Basically, he goes on to explain later in this, the author who translated the text, that what we know is when he's saying stuff like that, but then Epiphanes himself admits that he doesn't know when these groups started or where their genesis actually is from. So he'll try to say, oh, well, these ones were earlier and these ones were later and they're not connected, but he's just kind of basically lying or guessing. He doesn't really know.
Okay, but Isaiah 11 says that when the kingdom of heaven comes, we're not going to eat meat. So if we believe in Satan's little season, we think, so I no longer subscribe to that theory.
Oh, you don't? Okay. So you're rejecting it. Okay, let's get there, but let's keep going down. Click to the next usage. Keep going. Oh, here, look, go back. So this will bring us back. When he mentions the sects of the Hebrews, or the 7 Jewish sects, scribes, which we know Jesus is also rebuking, right? Oh, woe to you scribes, you Pharisees, you're like whitewashed tombs. You're beautiful on the outside with all your ritual hand washing, like Mark 7, but inside you're full of corpses, necron, corpses, eating in your belly, flesh, corpses. Okay. No. So look, the scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, Baptists, Essenes, that's the Essenes, and the Nazarenes, and then the Herodians, which we know were, King Herod. So the Nazarenes are a sect at the time, even before Jesus leading in. So now keep going, type in next, keep going. So here's the Nazarenes. So they're like the Baptists, from Gilead, Bashantis, the Transjordan, like I said. Go to the next one. So here's where he describes them. They recognize the fathers as persons in the Pentateuch, from Adam to Moses, Methuselah, Noah, Abraham, all of them, right? However, they would not accept the Pentateuch itself, the 5 books. Mm-hmm. They acknowledge Moses had believed that he received legislation, the law, the Torah, but not this legislation, the Pentateuch version. They said, but some other. And though they were Jews who kept all the observances, they would not offer sacrifice or eat. And that's flesh is really the actual Greek word or Latin word that he's using there. I think it's Greek, actually. They would not eat flesh. In their eyes, it was unlawful to eat flesh or make sacrifices with it. They claimed that these books are forgeries and that none of these customs were instituted by the fathers. This was the difference between the Nazarenes and the others, and their refutation is to be, and then he goes on to try to refute them. Here's why we shouldn't believe what they have to say, because Abraham offered a ram and blah, 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 blah. So the Nazarenes, from this text, we know, rejected those practices as not lawful. Now, what did Jesus say twice in our Greek Gospels? Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, quoting Hosea, right? And he goes on to say the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Jeremiah, the prophet who Jesus quotes often, again, throughout the Gospels, he quotes him even in the temple, which we're going to cover, which is the big revelation of our film, when Jesus is in the temple and he says, my house is meant to be a house of prayer, not sacrifice, right? But you've made it a den of what? Thieves. So mistranslation. We'll get to that. But before we get there, he's saying, he's quoting Jeremiah when he says that den of thieves. Jeremiah said the same thing of the temple in his time in Jeremiah 7:11. Pull that up really quick. So now we see Jeremiah 7:11. Just click on it. This house which bears my name, has it not become a den of robbers to you, or a den of thieves to you, right? Now go to Jeremiah 7:22. So he's saying the temple has become a den of thieves, right? 7:22, sorry.
22, okay.
Yeah. Now, don't click the NIV because go back. We'll talk about the NIV. Go to a better, NIV's a corrupted.
KJV?
Click on anything, American Standard, whatever. You can actually just click on all of them on Bible Hub to show. Look at the King James. Yeah, so look, Jeremiah 7:22. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. He's saying, God didn't command sacrifices when he brought you out of Egypt in the Exodus. He didn't command it. He's rebuking them for it, actually. And in fact, in the Peshitta leading up to this, in Jeremiah 7:21, Jeremiah says, go ahead. The Lord says, go ahead, eat your sacrifices, eat your meat. Go for it. He's saying it rhetorically, almost like, you want to see what happens? Go ahead and eat your meat. For I did not command you concerning burnt offerings. But in the Peshitta, the Aramaic Old Testament, which actually preserves some of the earlier, in the Lambs, the Aramaic, it says, go ahead, eat the flesh, which I did not command your fathers to eat. For in the day that I brought them out of Egypt, I did not speak to them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. That's in the Aramaic, the Peshitta version. But here in just ours, and so go back to the NIV, look at the way that we get so clever at twisting text. If you go back to the NIV, look at what word it adds. For when I brought them out of Egypt, I did not just give them commands about burnt offerings and sacrifices. But that word just does not exist in the Hebrew. The NIV added that word. So go back to Jeremiah 7:22 and go to Bible Hub. I think it'll pull up all the translations. Look at this. New International has the word just there. See? Now look, New Living. It was not burnt offering the sacrifices that I wanted from them. In the English Standard, I did not speak to your fathers or command them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. All of them, except for the Berean, whatever that is, none of them add that word just. It's a corruption. It's trying to say, I wanted sacrifices, but I didn't just want those. I wanted obedience and whatever.
Okay, so you're saying that Yahweh did not command to do sacrifices at all?
No.
Okay.
And that's what the Nazarenes believe, which I just showed you.
God commands to do sacrifices in the Bible. Give me the book and chapter.
Well, that's what I was getting at. It's Leviticus, Exodus,
right.
Deuteronomy.
So?
Yep.
Exodus chapter 20, verse 24. God explicitly gives the first commandment regarding altars and sacrificing burnt offerings and peace offerings. Let's do.
So this was the framing that I was going to give you, is even if you don't...
20 to 24.
And if you read this stuff, man, it's so gruesome. We talk about Epstein and all the blood ritual, occult magic, and all the sacrifices and the blood and the power and all the stuff.
Okay.
And then we look at this and think that God can... Go ahead.
Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. Mm-hmm. How do you rebuke this? With that Jeremiah quote?
With that Jeremiah quote.
Come on. This is God speaking to Moses.
Yeah, but Jeremiah, so check this out.
Wait. Mm-hmm. Yahweh is the father of Jesus or not? Okay.
Well, we're talking about, no. I'm not Gnostic or anything.
I'm not too, but I don't believe he is the father of Jesus.
Yeah,
I'm a bad Christian.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other podcast that we would have to have on this because it's so nuanced.
We just lost another 40% of our audience. Guys, if you're still with us, we love you.
It's such a nuance. So I don't want to get too much into semantics and names because I think even that becomes this very metaphysical, ethereal thing. But ultimately, Jesus refers to God as Abba, the Father, right? Mm-hmm. And then he refers...
Never mentions Yahweh.
Yeah, and he refers to the Pharisees and the Sadducees as their father, the devil, right?
Right.
So there's something going on there. But what I will say is in the scripture, there's this idea, Melchizedek, right? When Melchizedek comes after Abraham's been on this war campaign and sacrifice and all of that, when he comes finally to Jerusalem, which literally means city of peace, Melchizedek means king of righteousness or prince or priest of righteousness in the city of peace. Melchizedek brings him bread and wine.
He comes to Jerusalem? Jerusalem wasn't there in the
It's where Jerusalem was, yeah. So
Jerusalem was conquered. It wasn't built by the Jews.
I know, but what I'm saying is Melchizedek is it's called Salem.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in Salem, which is eventually Jerusalem. but Salem means peace. You can go to Genesis, Melchizedek, I think it's like 35 or something, right? Yeah. Oh, 14, sorry. Click on, go to that scripture and we'll read it. Yep.
After Abraham returned from defeating someone and the kings aligned with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh.
Yep.
Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest.
Pause. Bread and wine. Who else used bread and wine?
Jesus.
The Last Supper, right? Which we'll get to. So I wanted to note that. Then, sorry to cut you off, but he's the priest of God Most High.
Okay.
El Elyon is the name there. And I believe this is the first mention of El Elyon in the text, in the Pentateuch. It's the Most High God. Interesting, right? Well, are there other not high gods? What's going on with that?
Heresy. Blasphemy.
I know.
Love it.
Right? So Melchizedek is a priest in the order of El Elyon, the Most High God, and his offering is bread and wine. Rather than this whole sacrificial war. Remember I said war and sacrifice are together. That's what Abraham's been on, this bender of all that leading up to this point. And he says, blessed be Abraham by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. So what I would say is now tie that, remember Hebrews, I don't want to get into the writing of Hebrews. There's a bunch of contestation about that writing. Some say it was written by Paul, but most scholars say there's no way it was written by Paul. It's like impossible that it was written by Paul. But if we take that text, Hebrews says in Hebrews 10:4 that the blood of bulls and rams could never take away sin. That it can't. That's what it says. And then it goes on to talk about how Jesus is a priest most high forever in the order of Melchizedek, right? So remember he says, before Abraham, I am. Mm-hmm. There's some that would say this might even be a reference to this Melchizedekian tradition. The priest of the Essenes in these orders, they were called the Zadok, the Zadik, the righteous ones. Remember James, Jesus' brother, James the just? Mm-hmm. That's a English modern translation of saying James the righteous, the Zadok, in the order of this priesthood. So when Jesus comes and he delivers the Last Supper and the bread and the wine, it's not only matching this, but remember what he says. He says, this is my flesh, this is my blood. What we reveal in the film, and which is the ancient reading. And not only that, but there's modern scholars who have come up with this that aren't even vegetarian or vegan or anything. The earliest rendition of the Eucharist and what it meant is it was a replacement for the flesh and the blood, saying, don't eat the flesh and the blood of the Passover lamb. Eat this instead. This is my flesh, not the flesh of the lamb. This is my blood, not the blood of the lamb. This is what you're meant to do. And he does that after turning over the temple, right? And freeing the animals. It says he frees the sheep and he adds a replacement to the ritual. We know that the Elephantine document of the Passover letter is the oldest source for the Passover that we have. And it shows them using bread and wine for Passover, no lamb. And the oldest version of the Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. In fact, in Luke, it says when they're going to prepare the Passover, it says that they go on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which had become known as the Passover. And then Jesus shows up with the bread and the wine. Remember what he says in the Hebrew gospel that I pointed out. I have no desire to eat the flesh of the lamb. So that completes the picture that he's taking out this sacrificial ritual. He's honoring Jeremiah. Remember what Jeremiah said? When I called you out of Egypt, the Exodus, I didn't command you to do any sacrifices. The Passover. He's saying this Passover wasn't commanded.
Rebuke this one. We're getting back to Exodus 1:20. He said how to build an altar and to do sacrifice.
So that's my argument is there's two ways that you would argue this. So if you're someone who's uncomfortable with the idea of text being corrupted, first, I would point to Jeremiah. Keep that tab. I'll address it. Open up another tab. Mm-hmm. Jeremiah 8, verse 8. 8:8. Yep. How can you say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us when certainly, okay, so this is a ASV. Let me the translations and the trickery they do with the translations. Let's pick a really accurate one. NASB, and like I said, NASB is super solid. How can you say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us, but behold, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. Or another way to say it is the lying pen of the scribes has falsified it.
Okay, one second. How can you say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us, but behold, the lying pen of the scribes
Or look
has made it?
at the NABRE. How can you say we are wise with the law of the Lord? See that it has been changed into a falsehood by the lying pen of the scribes.
Yeah, but we don't know what they mean by the that was changed.
Jeremiah 7:22. God did not command sacrifices. When he brought you out of Egypt, he didn't command it. Remember what the Nazarenes said in the record of the Nazarenes. That they believed in all the forefathers, but they believed that the sacrifices were forgeries, that they weren't authentic to the fathers. And you've got Jeremiah here saying this. So now let me bring it to the final piece, because we could talk about this for all day. And I mean, I can
I'm with you.
I can continue to go as long as you want. But to bring this all together for another piece, which is watch my current film, Christspiracy, also called What Would Jesus Do? It's also at www.jdfilm.com or christspiracy.com, totally free. That film just scratches the surface of the truth of the Nazarenes. And we also not only, by the way, cover the Christian tradition on this and in Judaism before that, but we go to India, like you said. We look at, oh, they have holy cows, but yet they're sacrificing animals over there. We went to the world's largest animal sacrifice and documented it to show what the Temple of Jerusalem would have looked like. And the people over there trying to shut that sacrifice down, it's called the Gadamai Temple, and they literally sacrificed the animals to Gadamai, who is the Kali, the destroyer, basically a demonic type thing. The reason why they sacrifice it is because the guy was blessed and released from prison 500 years ago and did a sacrifice. And so now they honor him and his story and Ganamai by sacrificing tens of thousands of cattle. And
I condemn it.
Yeah. So our film goes through all of these different traditions and looks at the origins of it. But Jesus is the hero. He's the through line in the Nazarenes, because he was the one that came and shut all this down. And we even talk about the red heifer sacrifice and how they're trying to do this again. They want to reinstate the third temple and bring all the sacrifices back. And we reveal in the film how them flying the red heifers over recently, September a few years ago, was the spark that actually lit the fuse of Hamas to attack. According to Hamas, they said the red heifer is why they attacked on October 7th.
Hamas said the red heifers was one of the reasons of their attack. Okay, so yes, Hamas leadership did explicitly cite the presence of imported red heifers in Israel as a key motive for their October 7th, because they think that they're going to destroy
the Dome of the Rock and the Temple Mount and take it back over.
The mosque, okay.
Yeah.
But so Jews might have been lying to us, because if they want to have a third temple and to do sacrifices, it means they have the Ark of the Covenant, and they're not telling us.
That could be a way.
Because if they don't, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
This is one of the artifacts you have to have in that temple.
Yeah.
For the sacrifice.
But check this out. So now that you bring that up, so let me paint a picture. This is where I want to take it, because I know it's hard for people to imagine the Bible being corrupted, even though Jeremiah says that the Torah, that's the word he's using is Torah, the law. Who are you to say we are wise and we have the Torah, when the lying pen of the scribes has corrupted it, has falsified it? He's literally saying the scribes, their pen, he uses the word for the writing device, that they've corrupted it. Remember, Jesus said, woe to you scribes, you Pharisees. He's condemning your traditions of men that you've put on the word.
That's what I have a problem when people that say Bible cannot be corrupted. They always mention this verse of Jesus saying, "I have come here not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law."
Right.
And they think that law that Jesus mentioned is the law of the Bible of the first 5 books.
No, it's not. No.
It might be, but you're not sure, because he was saying back then the law he was referring to maybe to another law.
He is
different
so
that we have it right now in 2026.
And I've got somewhere to go with this that's going to blow your mind. So firstly, let's imagine it like this. Let's take the information that I've showed you and let's draw a thread that from the time of Jeremiah, he's potentially talking about the lying pen of the scribes corrupting the Torah, that God never commanded sacrifices. Right.
And Jeremiah is a pretty early book, right? It's like 10th or 12th book of the Bible.
He's a prophet that's rebuking them before even getting enslaved into Babylon, and I think he continues into Babylon a little bit. But yeah, he's one of the earlier prophets, but he's completely just condemning this practice. And there's even more that I'll show you in Jeremiah in a minute and how it relates to Jesus' temple cleansing, because that's the big reveal of the film. It'll tie all of it together. But the point is you've got Jeremiah the prophet rebuking the Torah and the sacrifices in 2 verses. You've got the Nazarenes that I showed you who said they didn't offer sacrifices or eat flesh. They believed it was unlawful. They believed that these were forgeries, matching what Jeremiah is saying, essentially. But if you're a person who even has a problem with that, like I just can't fathom that, in Ezekiel 20:25, go to Ezekiel 20:25. So click on that. So I gave them other statutes that were not good and laws through which they could not live, or really the proper rendering is laws which did not bring life, and defiled them through their gifts, their sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. So what he's saying here, Ezekiel, you can take this one framework, even if you're challenged by what I'm saying, is we know that in the Christian tradition, in all various forms, that Jesus ended sacrifice because he's the final sacrifice, right? So sacrifice is done because of that. And there's an argument that through sin, man enters this sacrificial state, and God essentially gives it over as a concession, because sacrifice is not unique to Judaism. It's ancient Babylonian.
Sure.
In fact, we talked about the time of the time of Noah when he does his sacrifice. Remember, when Noah sacrifices in chapter 8 and 9, after he comes off the ark, God's mad. God's mad in the text. He's like, man's heart is only evil continually. You can't do the blood. Don't drink the blood. Like, I'll give you everything that moves, he says. And this is a key point that we need to hit. This is coming full circle to the bug issue I mentioned. That word, when it says that God gave Noah everything that moves now for food, it's one Hebrew word, remus, which means bugs. And it's a completely separate category in the creation narrative. So God creates the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, the beasts of the field, and everything that moves or creeps on the earth is another category. That is bugs. So type in remus Hebrew.
Remus.
It's R-E-M-E-S.
R-E-M-E-S.
Mm-hmm. So the Bible is so creeping thing, moving thing, they're going to say describe insects first, right? But it'll also say reptiles and some gliding sea creatures or whatever. We know none of that's kosher, so it couldn't be that, because it wouldn't even be kosher if it was reptiles. But go down to an actual Hebrew dictionary. Like, keep going a little further. Palim, go to Palim. That's the actual Hebrew dictionary. Look at that. Insect, bug, and then vermin is the third meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is a Hebrew dictionary, so it's not a self-referential, like using the scripture to determine from other. But we know, like I said, in the creation narrative, it's not birds.
How to catch those insects and eat them?
I know, right? You got to be John the
Grasshoppers?
Baptist. You got to be John the Baptist.
How many do you need them?
Huh?
How many do you need those insects?
I know,
to
right?
be
Well,
full?
check this out. Look up the Genesis Apocryphon. Type in Genesis Apocryphon, and then type in Noah's diet, maybe.
And he lived to how many years? Like 600 years? 900 years?
See, this is wrong. Genesis Apocryphon. Here, this is wrong. See, you can't even trust.
I trust everything that's on Google.
I know. So go to by the way, Genesis Apocryphon is a text of Genesis found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you may or may not be familiar, but like our Old Testament that we have in our Bible is translated from the Masoretic text, which is actually like written or translated in like the thousands AD. Like it's a really, really, really late text. But go back to the search bar and go to Genesis Apocryphon and just look up the actual text. We know this is an ancient document. This is like 1st century BC.
30. Okay. Let's do diet. No.
But is this? I want to read the actual text.
Meat? No.
Translation. There you go. Click on that one. Yeah. So type in herbs. Maybe it'll bring it up.
Nope.
Type in vegetable.
Vegetation and
Yeah, no,
vegetables.
oh yeah, there it is. When he comes off the ark, in this version, I give you and all your descendants for eating the vegetables and plants by the land, but any sort of blood you will not eat. So look at that. When he comes off the ark in the Genesis Apocryphon from the Dead Sea Scrolls, an actual ancient document, he isn't given remus, bugs, everything that moves or creeps. He and his family are given the plants again, but it's even maybe expanded from just the fruits and herb-bearing seed, but also the idea is like the grasses of the field, the crops, the grain and everything, but blood you shall not eat. And we have that same parallel in our Bible in Genesis 9. God's mad that he does the sacrifice. He says, you can't do the blood. He says, you can have bugs, apparently, remus, right? Everything that moves. And then he says, your lifespan will be cut to 120 years. So before that, people were living way longer, but we also know, this is a whole other conversation, but longevity-wise, the Essenes, the Nazarenes, they're documented by Philo, Josephus, and a few others as living extremely long lives. So Simeon, who's the cousin or brother of James the Just, after James, he's the next leader in the bishops, like it's in the church history. He is martyred at 120 years old, still preaching. And Philo says that the Essenes, the Nazarenes, they're like these illustrious men. For whatever reason, they live to like 120 years. So they're like maxing out this Noah.
This gap?
Yeah.
Gap.
And why? So it's tied to the idea that eating flesh and killing death begets death. You know, as you eat death, you die. In the Garden of Eden, there's forever life or extended life, and they're living on the plant food. So what I'm pointing out here, though, is in this Garden of Eden narrative, in this Noah narrative, they come off the boat and they're eating just vegetation. They're not permitted to eat bugs or meat or anything. What I'm getting at, though, is if you have a hard time with the idea of the Bible being corrupted, you can at least think of it like this, that sacrificial culture is a part of all religions at the time. The Akkadian religion, the Sumerian text, whatever. In fact, in the Noah narrative, you know, it says that God smells a sweet savor, a sweet aroma of the sacrifice, but then he gets all angry. That word sweet savor or sweet aroma of the sacrifice is mentioned like thousands of years before our biblical text in the Akkadian, like the Epic of Gilgamesh and all of this. And it's talking about demons smelling the sweet savor of sacrifice and coming down. It says the gods swarm like flies around the sacrifice to eat and consume the blood, and they smell the sweet savor. So we know, have you ever heard of documentary source hypothesis?
Mm-mm.
Type in JEDP theory. Type in that.
JEDP theory.
Mm-hmm. The JEDP theory, also known as the documentary hypothesis, proposes that the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, were written not by Moses, but by 4 distinct authors or groups of authors over several centuries. The J is the Yahwist source, show more. E is the Elohist, D is the Deuteronomist, and the P is the priestly. The priests are writing. The P is the latest, and the sweet savor and a lot of these sacrificial texts are in the P material. How do they know this? They call it a theory or a hypothesis because they have to, because people, you know, there's no way to 100% prove this because you're talking about thousands of years ago. But using stylometry, meaning studying the language of the text and the vocabulary used, it's obvious that 4 different authors are writing the text. For instance, Moses is supposed to have written the first 5 books of the Bible.
He was killed in the last one.
But he's killed. He also goes from first person to third person when he's talking.
And why did Yahweh kill him?
Right. There's so many questions. And he refers to himself as the most humble man who ever lived. Do you think Moses would have really humble bragged like that? Maybe, maybe not. So
John said Jesus loved him. So
yeah.
Out of all the disciples, come on.
But the idea is biblical scholars know, and even Christian biblical scholars will admit, like, that people who have faith still, they're not just some secular scholars trying to tear apart the Bible. They know that there's multiple sources that make up the Pentateuch, which begins to match this theory of the lying pen of the scribes and the priests who add in more. So check this out. Now I'm going to paint this picture of how this could all be possible. The second theory. So one theory is maybe God just allowed or granted the sacrifices because they were doing them anyways, and it was a way to wean them off eventually until Christ comes, and then Christ ends sacrifice forever, right? Fine reading. Or Jeremiah and the Nazarenes are rebuking the sacrifices as never commanded by God, and that they were interpolations and corruptions into the text. And then Jesus comes to finally shut it down and say, I abolish this. God didn't want this. He desires mercy, not sacrifice, knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. So Jeremiah, type in 2 Kings 22. This is where it's going to get really wild.
I love it. Let's go.
The book of the law found in 2 Kings 22. So during the reign of Josiah, it says here that King Josiah sent, Hilkiah the high priest and have him get the money brought to the temple of the Lord. So he's sending the high priest to go fetch the money they're making, right, at the temple. And then essentially Hilkiah the high priest says to Stephen the secretary, I have found the book of law in the temple of the Lord. And he gives it to Stephen to read it. Then Stephen the secretary went to the king and reported to him, your officials have paid out the money, but the high priest has given me a book. And then when Josiah reads the book, Josiah reads it and he rents his clothes. It says that he tears his clothes. When King Josiah heard the words of the book, he tore his robes. And he goes on to say, great is the anger that burns against us because those who have gone before us have not obeyed the words of this book. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written here according to us. Interesting. So essentially what it's saying is, Hilkiah the high priest finds a book of the law, a book, not 5 books, a book of the law next to the Ark of the Covenant, actually, in the temple, and he brings it out. The king tears his robes, and then immediately after, we're not going to get into it, anyone can check it, but then Josiah goes in and triples down and commands this massive Passover feast after this, okay? Well, guess what? Jeremiah's father is said to have been a man named Hilkiah, a priest. Jeremiah is a priestly lineage, and they would have been living around the same time. So there's an argument within biblical scholarship that Jeremiah's father is Hilkiah, the high priest, that found this book of the law. And then in the parallel, so many people may know that Kings and Chronicles parallel each other. Chronicles gives a little more information and says that they actually go and read this book to the other scribes, and they're like checking it out. And they do it from like morning until lunchtime. So like, it's really short. And they orate on it, and they're like just blown away by this book. So there's no way it could have been the Pentateuch, for one. Now check this out. Type in 2 Maccabees. Jeremiah hides the book of the law.
Maccabees, it means we're reading the Catholic Bible,
in
right?
2 Maccabees 2, yep. The prophet Jeremiah, this is going to say does not explicitly hide the written book of the law. Instead, the text details how the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, and the altar of incense of a cave in Mount Nebo, which is in Moab. When you read the text, don't forget the commandments of the Lord, it says. Essentially, we know the book of the law, and the Ark of the Covenant was meant to house the book of the law. What I'm getting at, anyone can research for themselves. There's a book written by a man that I'm working with on my next film called the Moses Scroll. And it's all about this scroll that was found in the 1800s, which starts to elucidate potentially what this story here is getting at. That there was Hilkiah the high priest, that he found an alternate book of the law, that he's Jeremiah's father. Jeremiah takes the law and the Ark of the Covenant, hides it in a cave in Moab, it says, okay? Jeremiah is also the prophet who says God did not command sacrifice. The lying pen of the scribes has corrupted it. He also says, I found the law and I devoured it. You can even look that up if you want. Jeremiah devours the law. Yeah. Internalizing God's message. So he says he ate it, he devours it, but the idea is he's taken this law that he's found and he's really downloaded and ingested the truth about it, and then he goes out to preach his prophetic message as a prophet. And what does he say? Jeremiah 7:22, God never commanded sacrifices. You've made this temple a den of robbers, which we're still going to come back to, the true translation of that and how it ties all this together. But then he goes and he hides this, according to Maccabees, in a cave in Moab. Now check this out. I have a friend named Ross Nichols. Shout out Ross if you're listening.
I hope you do.
He's a biblical researcher and investigator. He comes from a similar background to me, was raised in the Protestant church, but he has obsessively looked over his scriptures his whole life to really find what the truth is. And eventually it led him to question things, much like I'm sure a lot of the viewers that you have question things, and the way that the Little Season crowd has started. He's been on his own journey. And a part of that process was around the time of the lockdowns, when everybody had more time, he opened up this case about this Dead Sea Scroll that was found in the 1800s. The reason why he opened it up is because this book that was found was deemed a forgery in the 1800s. Everybody said that it was this fake book that this guy named Moses Shapira found. But he always had this sinking feeling that there was more to the story, that something wasn't adding up. Because you learn about this when you're studying biblical manuscripts. They're like, oh, here's what a true manuscript is, and here's what a forgery is. And here's a story of a forgery. It's this guy, one example is Moses Shapira. He found this text in the 1800s, and it was fake, right? Simultaneously, during the same time in the lockdowns when he was researching, one of the top Hebrew scholars, this guy named Edan Dershowitz, had the same feeling. And he started researching it. And they were doing it separately, and they both came to the same conclusions, not knowing until eventually they met. And they both wrote books on it. Edan wrote his book, and Ross wrote his book. But essentially it's this, that there's this book that was found in the 1800s by Bedouin shepherds. Same story as the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were found in the 1940s, right? The shepherds brought it to someone who eventually brought it to this guy named Moses Shapira. Moses Shapira was an antiquities dealer living in Jerusalem. He was basically selling knickknacks for pilgrims who were coming to visit. And he was famous for like translating the Siloam inscription, giving an alternate translation that ended up being accurate. He was super into archaeology and all of that of his time. And he gets these 16 strips of this scroll that supposedly came from Bedouin shepherds. And this is in like 1883, I think it is. And he reviews them, and he comes to realize, oh, this is the book of Deuteronomy, pretty much. It's very similar, but there's some key differences, but it's written like the book of Deuteronomy. He does his own investigation into the text and determines, this looks real. This looks legit. It's in Paleo Hebrew. It's on these ancient strips. It's got, the whole thing is written in first person, no third person. And then he takes it up to England to try to sell it to British Antiquities up there and put it in a museum or whatever. And they say, okay, well, give us 15 of the strips, you keep one, and we'll do some science and see if we can determine whether or not this is real. Shortly thereafter, multiple scholars come out and say, this is a forgery. He cut the bottom of a scroll off, and you can see the cutting here, and you can, he wrote in the margins, and he used Paleo Hebrew, which no one would ever use, and he put interpuncts in between the words, like the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments have the little dots in between each word. Mm-hmm. They said, oh, he faked that because they would never write that on a scroll. The interpuncts were only for stone, like the 10 Commandments. Here's all the reasons why it was fake. And it was wrapped in these, it was wrapped in linen, and it has this sticky stuff on it. He's trying to make it look old. They had all these reasons, right? And then they said he forged it. And then less than a year later, Moses Shapira is found in Rotterdam, and dead by suicide. So they say he committed suicide, but he's got 2 bullet holes to the head. Okay? In his belongings is one of those strips of this text. And there's been just this mystery of like, wait a minute, what? It's almost like a murder mystery too, in a way. Like, did he actually kill himself? Or was it like an Epstein kind of thing? Like, what's going on? Because how do you do 2 bullet holes? That...
Just to make sure, bro. 1 and 2.
Yeah, just to make sure. Yeah, you got to do it quick, huh? So now come back to the science of the scroll, or the reasons why they said that it was a forgery. This happened in 1883. The Dead Sea Scrolls weren't found until the 1940s. But here's the issue. The Dead Sea Scrolls, many of them were written in Paleo Hebrew, interpuncts, wrapped in linen with a sticky tar substance. All of the attributes that they used to discredit his scroll were attributes of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s. So because of this, it caused these modern researchers like Ross, and also biblical top Hebrew scholars like Edan Dershowitz, to open the case. And they've been doing all the study going back into the records of all of his correspondence and everything, trying to understand the scroll, looking at the translation of what it actually said, understanding the reasons that it was deemed a forgery, which have all been pretty much proven wrong, to the point now where top scholars like Dr. James Tabor, who's one of my friends and mentors, I actually have an interview with him right after this. He's written an article for Biblical Archaeology Review that he's convinced that it's a real document, that it was mislabeled as a forgery. The kicker is this: it looks like Deuteronomy in every way. No animal sacrifices. There's only one mention of animal sacrifice, and it's in a negative light, talking about, I believe it's the Midianites who were doing the animal sacrifices to their God. But there's no what's called the law code. So if you look up, type in the law code Deuteronomy, chapters 12 through 26 is what's known as the Deuteronomic Code or the Law Code. It's where all the sacrifices come in from Deuteronomy. Now, go to Deuteronomy chapter 11. I'm going to show you something really interesting that ties all this together as well. So if you go down to the end, he says, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. So this is after the 10 Commandments are delivered. And what he's essentially saying is, now you're going to learn the blessings and the curses. So you get blessings if you follow the 10 Commandments, and here's the way you're blessed. Like if you don't kill, then blessed is the one who doesn't kill, because he will, it's supposed to lay out the blessings and the curses. The curses are the consequences if you don't follow the 10 Commandments, right? So he says, I'm about to set before you the blessings and the curses. Then now go to chapter 12. Now, we go into worship being centralized in Jerusalem and go to chapter 13.
Not in Jerusalem. They're not in Jerusalem.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's the one place of worship. These are the decrees and laws you must be careful. Spreading trees, some of the, it goes into the tribes coming together and sacrificing. Watch. So keep scrolling down. Take whatever you vowed to give, go to the place of the Lord, put your burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord. So this is in verse 26. Go down. Yeah, see, it starts talking about offerings and sacrifices, bringing the meat and the blood. The blood of your sacrifices must be poured beside the altar. So this is all in chapter 12. It's centralizing temple worship. And I won't make you do it right now, but if you go 13, 14, it just gets crazier and crazier to where the laws about sacrificing if you're on your period, if you're a female, like all of this stuff, right? Now look, go to chapter 28, Deuteronomy 28. Boom. Blessings for obedience. So if you were to start, like I said, with chapter 12, remember chapter 11, he says, I'm going to lay before you the blessings and the curses. Then chapter 12, there's no blessings and curses. It's just about where you sacrifice and then how to sacrifice and for what. Boom, boom, boom. All the way to chapter 27 is the last bit on that.
Almost impossible to keep up.
Yeah. And then chapter 28, if you follow the Lord carefully and you keep it, you will receive the blessings and the curses. And look, it's got blessings here that it's orating, but it's not even complete, the blessings and the curses in this version. But it's what scholars call either the law code, like I said, 12 through 27, or some people call it Moses interrupted. Why? Because he's literally interrupted. In chapter 11, he says, I'm about to deliver the blessings and the curses, and it doesn't show up until chapter 28. So that entire 12 through 27 is this added segment in that even goes in and out of third person and all of that, right?
Okay, who's beneficiary of this then?
The beneficiary of adding the law code? The priests who are making all the money off the sacrifices. It was a massive wealth producing system. It's a massive, so this is getting even more tinfoil hat, but I'll put it on. This is my theory on it. So I know you've talked about like MK Ultra and stuff like this on this podcast. MK Ultra survivors often talk about how one of the first things they have to do for their ritual programming is they have to kill an animal, typically a cat, sometimes a dog. They do the same thing in what's called animal trauma training in the military, when the top level, like super soldiers and even like, what do they call them? Army Rangers. They go and they hang a live dog up and they all have to go stab the dog to desensitize their trauma. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, military trauma training.
Military.
The one thing I will say about the recent administration is they actually banned this. I think Trump or RFK or somebody. Mm-hmm.
Medic, nope. Live tissue
Military
trauma.
live tissue trauma training.
Using animals in the U.S., providing the new comment made.
There you go. Animal torture and military training exercises. Yeah, see, every year.
Every year, more than 10,000 animals are shot, stabbed, mutilated, and killed in military training exercise.
Yeah. Anyways, anyone can look it up, but it's a real thing that happens. And in fact, supposedly Trump banned it this year, which was a kind of a big deal. But this is what I'm getting at. Remember how I said, both anthropologically and scripturally, you can tie animal sacrifice and killing to war? And Azazel, he's the one who created the war. Azazel is the sacrificial animal, and he created the military weapons. So at a scriptural level, you can understand it like that, but even at a baseline level of thinking about MK Ultra and all this, when you desensitize yourself by killing an animal yourself, it's literally creates an alternate personality in your brain. You have to compartmentalize, because we're not naturally killers. We don't want to kill. We don't want to. Like if you put a baby, if you put a baby with like an apple and a rabbit, it's going to eat the apple and be friends with the rabbit. It's not going to try to go kill the rabbit, right? It's like our inner child. And Jesus said to become like children into the kingdom of heaven, right? So it's reverting back to that simple, innocent understanding is really from when we're young, and that's why I call it the matrix. From when we're young, we're taught that the pig on our plate is to be eaten and the dog on our couch is to be loved. But they're the same animal, basically. Like, in fact, pigs are smarter than dogs. When I say the same, I mean the capacity to suffer, intelligence. It's, there's no reason.
Organ-wise.
Yeah. And in some cultures, they eat dogs, So they choose to eat dogs over in like some Asian countries and whatnot. But my point is this, is that in ancient times, they used to use, when you talk about who benefits, animal sacrifice always happened before war or right after war. It was a way to prepare everyone for battle, get the bloodlust up.
Right.
In the Greco-Roman world too, you see this, or it's after to celebrate. And when you talk about splashing on the altar, remember what I said, altar? In the MK Ultra documents, they talk about the personality that they gain control of, these subjects, when they're manipulating their mind, they call it their altar, right? So you create and you generate through the altar and through sacrifice a subservient or alternate state of mind. And you've got the money flowing through, all the taxes, the Roman, like I said, Pliny the Elder, who we looked up, he was mad that the Christians moved in and were shutting down sacrifice because it was messing up their meat sales. It was messing up the temple rights and all the money being made off of it.
Okay. Eskimos, what do they eat?
Whales, a lot of them. Is that what you're going to say? A lot of times they live off a whale
deer,
bladder. Yeah. So when we get into the conversation around ethics, is that when you get into a survival situation, there's some that would argue that ethically speaking, if you have to kill an animal to eat it to survive, like that's just what you have to do. But here in our modern culture, we're sitting in Los Angeles. We don't have to do that. We actually don't do that. We go to the grocery store to buy our meat and someone else has killed it. And in fact, all the slaughterhouse workers are primarily prisoners on parole or immigrants working for as little as 97 cents a day, killing animals all day.
97 cents a day.
I got it sourced in my film.
Bro.
I got it sourced
97 cents.
I said as little as 97 cents a day.
A day. Migrants working in slaughterhouse.
Let's see. It's on the source for it is on the website. We have a sources page for our film because we actually
watch the film.
Yeah, it's there. It's as little as 97 cents a day. I mean, there's more, but it's like minimum wage or less. It's most of the time it's less because, like I said, it's prisoners on parole. They're working with a halfway house. I interviewed one of these guys. It's in my film. So there's a prisoner that I interviewed, and he's living in a halfway house. He's gone to prison for murder, for killing someone. But now the only job he can get is in a slaughterhouse because no one else wants to do it. Because like I said, no one wants to kill. No one has a desire to go kill animals. So they get people that they have to do it. So they pull the prisoners or the immigrants that they can, and it's all under threat and coercion. It's either kill the animals in the slaughterhouse or go back to prison, or we deport you and send you back to your country. And then they can pay them less and everything. But even more than the pay, the more important thing is slaughterhouse workers have among the highest rates of suicide, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic abuse, you name it. And even if you're, we know, I'm sure people are listening to the podcast and thinking, well, the Apostle Paul did away with all this. He said, it doesn't matter what you eat. The people who only eat vegetables are weak, which he's actually referring to James the Just and the other brothers. But he's having this
That's
debate.
bullying.
He's having this debate about it. But he says, even I, Paul, won't eat flesh until the end of the age if it causes my brother to stumble. And pretty much admits that he's going to abstain to not cause his brother to stumble. What's causing your brother to stumble more than making him kill animals on your behalf to the detriment of his own mental health, spousal abuse, domestic abuse, drug addiction, you name it? The stats are all there. Again, this is all sourced on my film page. But go watch, when you watch my film, you'll see I, in my film, am genuinely looking for a Christ-like way to kill and eat animals so that I can continue to do it, so that we can show, is there a way to do this? And in the process, we go to a humane slaughterhouse, a humane one, find out that they're utilizing prisoners on parole and that the prisoners are going through all this trauma. And he's admitting, he's like, I killed someone, but I'm around knives and blood all day and just chopping heads off animals and everything. It's nuts. And then on top of that, we're talking about the raising and the killing, but how do the animals even get there? They get there through insemination. We artificially breed 90 billion land animals a year. 90 billion animals. And this is a low estimate. It's probably higher. If you include fishes that we catch from the sea, we're talking trillions, countless trillions of death and mutilation to kill and consume. But just talking about the land animals, we're artificially inseminating these animals. And when I say that, you know what I mean, right? Like we're ejaculating a bull and we're taking it, and they electrically prod to do that, to get the semen out. And then you force impregnate by putting your fist in the back of a cow.
Oh, bro, come on.
Well, I'm just
We
saying,
just lost the last 10%. That's it. We're done. No one's watching it right now.
but listen,
at this
if you're
point.
someone who's a little seasoned, or if you're someone who's into the Nephilim, what do they say about the Nephilim? The Nephilim were all about breeding with animals and all this
Bro,
trippy
but
stuff.
the fisting stuff. Come on.
Okay.
Is this in your film?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. The dairy industry, this is how they keep the cows pregnant so that we can have dairy to drink and all of this. And we're not baby cows. We're human beings. Like we have our mom's milk and then we wean off of it when we're babies.
In the New Jerusalem, gonna be rivers of milk and honey. What milk?
Okay, you
Not
ready?
human milk.
Yeah. So, for instance, another mistranslation. Honey, in those texts, if you look it up, it's davash.
Honey is bee's milk.
Well, it's kind of that. So check it out. Milk and honey. Davash is dates. Look up D-V-A-S-H. Davash.
D-V-A-S-H.
A-S-H.
Meaning Hebrew. Bee honey.
Yeah, it's gonna say bee honey, but take off Hebrew real quick. Just watch. Again, you got to remember the Bible is self-referential when you get a lot of these texts.
You said what? Figs?
It's dates.
Dates?
Yeah.
They're just dates.
In Hebrew, davash is honey. However, in ancient biblical, refers to the thick, sweet syrup extracted from dates. And look, it even says there in ancient biblical texts. That's the honey. And then the milk part, again, I don't want to take up the whole time going into all this etymology, but essentially the milk refers to the milk of the land, of the fruits and the nuts, just like how we have fruit, like nut. It's the same way that this is talking about an extraction from dates, the sweet nectar of the dates. It's the same thing with that milk. And I have many. So remember how I said John the Baptist, the locust and honey? There's an ancient Nazarene text that's preserved that basically describes John the Baptist's diet as eating milk of the field. And when you look at the language behind milk of the field, it's an ancient word that's literally referring to like nut and seed milk, like the milk of the field. So, and that's how they're trying to describe the carob thing.
Okay, how about Jesus eating and feeding others with fish?
Okay. So again, I don't want to go too off the rails and take up too much time. First and foremost, I'll say I've covered this whole topic on my YouTube channel. So if you go to Christspiracy's YouTube channel or just type in my name, Kameron Waters, because it's on my collaborations, I did a story that the title is The Gospel Catch. And I go through all of the fish stories and describe how they're fishy. And again, I'm a fisherman. Like I grew up, that was my number one favorite pastime, was fishing. And just like you, I
did with my dad.
Yeah, I would try to do anything in my past to justify, and oh yeah, Jesus was a fisherman. You know, he helped the people catch fish, and he fed the people the 5,000 fish, right? Check this out. So I'll give you a little taste.
Please.
And then everyone can go watch the deeper dive. Let's take the feeding of the multitudes, all right? When Jesus refers to that miracle later in Matthew 16:9, in Mark 8:19, pull it up really quick. Pull up Matthew 16:9. Yep. Do you still not understand? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many basketfuls you gathered? Keep going to the next verse, if you can. Is there? Oh.
No, but it's not.
Maybe just go to 16.
16, okay. 16:9, 16:10 is...
Yeah.
Or 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many basketful you gathered? How is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread?
The point is there's no mention of fish. Jesus recalls it. And it's the same thing in Mark 8:19. He only mentions the bread, no fish. This is Jesus' own words, literally red letters, okay?
Mark 8:19. When I broke 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets of pieces did you pick up? This is a Mandela effect?
Bro, go to Mark 6, go to John 6:5.
John 6:5.
Jesus asked for bread. Look.
When Jesus looked up and saw the great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked.
So he asked for bread. Now look, look at verse number 13 down there. So when they gathered them and filled the 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. So it's only
wait a minute, where's
bread left
fish?
over. It's in there. It's in there, but I'm saying it's wedged in with all these other statements of just bread. So
here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish
after, right?
But how far?
But look, Jesus is asking for bread, and they're picking up bread after that was multiplied, that was eaten. Okay. Now go to let's see. Go to John. Type in John. Peter walking on water, or Peter didn't understand the loaves. Yeah. So here it says, a strong wind. Oh, type in, sorry, I think it's a little bit before that. Just type in Peter walking on water, didn't understand the loaves. Yeah, there you go. Oh, it's in Mark, sorry, Mark 6:25. Yeah. So go to that, click on Mark 6:52. So it says here, for they had not understood about the loaves, and their hearts were hardened. So the reason why I bring this up is someone listening will say, oh, well, in Matthew 16:9 and in Mark 8:19, it says, don't you remember when I multiplied the loaves? But then he goes on to talk about the leaven of the Pharisees. So he's like, he's just bringing up bread because he's talking about bread. In this instance, he's not talking about bread at all. He's talking about walking on water. And he's saying he doesn't remember the miracle of the loaves. Also, later, everybody can proof text all this. Later in John, and I think it might be in Mark as well, after the miracle, they go back and return to that spot where the miracle happened. And it says they return to the place where the loaves were multiplied. And it doesn't mention any fish. The earliest church fathers, like Irenaeus, he's writing in like 180 AD. He's like one of the earliest church fathers of the, empirical religion. And he mentions the multitude miracle story and doesn't mention fish. He only mentions the loaves. There's multiple church fathers early on who don't mention the fish. They just mention the loaves. The Didache, which is the first, you might have heard this, I'm not sure, it's the teaching of the 12. It's believed to be 1st century by all the top scholars. They agree. It's the first Christian liturgy. It mentions the multiplication of the loaves and not the fish. It talks about the loaves scattering across the hills. No mention of fish. Now, is it full-on scribal corruption, like we were talking about earlier? Possibly. And I have some arguments of why that could be the case, but it could also just be simply a misunderstanding. So Elijah and Elisha, they multiplied bread. Do you remember this?
Mm-mm.
Type in Elisha, Elisha. Elisha multiplies loaves. Yeah.
Feeding not about 20 barley loaves to feed a crowd of 100 men. Elisha, okay.
Yeah. So remember, Elisha and Elisha are confused with Jesus and John the Baptist in the Gospels. They're like, isn't that Elisha? Isn't that Elisha? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the Old Testament, in 2 Kings there, they multiply the loaves for all the soldiers. Same type of miracle, right? But no fish in this story. Now, there's an ancient Hebrew idiom for multiplication called to fish something, fishing. When you said, so type in Genesis, I believe it's 35, or type in Genesis Manasseh blessing. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Genesis 48. Man, my numbers are all messed up today. I need some more
That's
coffee.
why you have to, you have to eat some meat, bro.
So he says, Genesis 48, keep going down, and then I will bless them. Hold on. My ancestors. Oh, right there, 16. Go down to 16. I pray that that they will become great families and nations on the earth. Oh man, hold on. Yeah, I think it's that one. But type in Genesis 48, multiply greatly. Yeah. So he tells the Manasseh and Ephraim that they will multiply greatly into many nations. I will multiply your descendants. Right? So descendants as well.
Multitude in the midst of the earth.
So then do this. This will cut to the chase. Basically, that word multiply that he's using in this blessing, he's saying that they will multiply, but the word that's used is the word fish as a verb form. So type in Genesis 48, daga, D-A-G-A-H. See if that pulls it up. In Genesis 48, the Hebrew word daga refers to the abundant multiplication, translated as let them grow into a multitude. So type in daga fish. Yeah, in Genesis 48, the fish connection appears in verse 16 where Jacob blesses. So let them multiply like fish. See that? There's a fish idiom. Look at the second bullet point. In the original Hebrew, the verb used here connected to the noun is literally translated as let them multiply like fish, because the fish are the first to multiply in the whole be fruitful and multiply in the creation narrative. So it's like this. The same way we use idioms in our language, back then, if I wanted to multiply a bunch of bread for you and all my whoever I'm trying to preach to, I would say that I'm fishing the bread. I'm multiplying it. So that could have been translated over time into bread and fish. And if Jesus is literally fulfilling the Elisha like he is everything else, it was only bread originally in the Elisha narrative as well. And all the church fathers say that it was, not all of them, but the earliest church fathers before the Greek Gospels start to kick off, right? So that being framed, that's just one example of why I call the fish stories the fishy stories, because Jesus himself is saying, don't you remember when I multiplied the loaves? And all throughout the text, you see these instances where it's pointing at just loaves and not fish.
Okay, was it wine or just grape juice?
Well, I think it's pretty standard and known that in ancient times, wine was really low alcohol anyways. It was very minimal. And in fact, a lot of water that was drinking, wine would be added to just eliminate bacteria, because the alcohol would delete it or eliminate it. But you can look this up now or on your own time. The earliest instances of the Eucharist in the Syriac tradition, which is the Aramaic, which is Jesus's language, it was bread and water. That was the Eucharist. And that's a whole podcast we can do on bread and water. But essentially, so check this out. This is all getting at what I wanted to come to was, you were like, well, how do I use this to justify eating flesh now? If I'm a Christian or whatever, how can I come to these conclusions? There's two things I really want to land on before we end, and how it all pertains to the little season and all of that too, is firstly, let's get back to the temple cleansing and tie that knot there with what Jesus really said. Remember, we talked about this other manuscript. Like I said, there's this potential other Deuteronomy that Jesus maybe was talking about when he says, your law says But I say, and he's always contradicting their law. Jeremiah has this other law. The Nazarenes supposedly have this other law. There's this other law. Here's an interesting piece too. The Moses scroll that I talked about that Shapira found in the 1800s.
Not Ben.
Yeah, not Ben. Facts don't care about your feelings, right? But not only does it not have the sacrifices, but in the 10 Commandments of this document that Shapira had, it says, thou shalt not kill the soul of your brother, which is even more specific, the nefesh, for thou shalt not kill or murder. But then it also has, you shouldn't even hate your brother in your heart. And then when it talks about adultery, it says you shall not commit adultery, but it also says you shall not even lust for your neighbor's wife in your heart.
Okay, but Jesus told this.
This is what Jesus said.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus
even
said,
you have lust.
Right. And this document has that. So it's interesting. It's almost like even more, if this document turns out to be real, which, by the way, the next film that I'm working on is we're chasing down the strips. We believe, Ross believes he knows where they wound up. Whole other story for another podcast, but we're going to try to find them and carbon date them so that we can prove how old they are. And if that does, it'll be the most controversial case in biblical history. It'll really make sense of this whole Deuteronomy case and the missing sacrifices.
Bro, if you do this, you have to wear a helmet because there can be 2 bullets.
Yeah, I'm going to try to avoid that if I can. But what I was going to say is, so imagine, let's shelve all that. You might be skeptical, but what does Jesus actually do when he goes into the temple? This is what I would call actually a direct action animal liberation is what's really happening at the temple. So as you see here, I have my hat, Make Christians Vegan Again. Like I told you.
It's blurred all the time. It was blurred. In the
because like I said, Pliny the Elder said they ate only harmless food and they shut the temples down. But the word vegan is just a misnomer. It's a modern term that was invented, to describe people who don't want to exploit animals. But it's an ancient ethic is what I'm getting at, that these Christians seem to have, but also not only Jesus and his brother had with this not eating animal flesh since his birth. Mary would have raised James that way. She would have also raised Jesus that way. But it goes even beyond what you're eating. It's actually going and being a direct action animal liberationist. Like today, there are direct action animal liberationists who go and free animals from slaughterhouses, from animal testing. I was just a part of one. I've actually got a potential felony because I went into Ridgeland Farms in Wisconsin and helped some of these groups rescue some beagles from animal testing from the Fauci labs. So you can watch all my content on that. They have 300 accounts of felony animal cruelty at these animal testing facilities on beagles, who are the most subservient, kind animals. That's why they do it. And they were supposed to be shut down based off of previous investigations of animal cruelty, and they almost got a felony, but they got out of it by saying they were going to shut down, many months later, but they were still, breeding, selling dogs, doing all that. So activists went and rescued a bunch of dogs, and I was a part of that. I filmed it, but then I ended up rescuing a dog myself because I couldn't help it when I was there looking at them crying, just whimpering, wanting to get freedom. So I'm actually facing a potential felony for doing this. And the reason why I bring that up is because when the Patriot Act happened after 9/11, they made the domestic terrorist list. It was one of the things that was put forth. And at the top of that list were animal liberationists, people who
No way.
Yes. Type in Patriot Act, animal activist terrorists.
Animal
Activist terrorists, just say that.
Are occasionally classified as domestic terrorists. What?
Yeah. There it is, Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which was a part of the Patriot Act, right? So these were activists back then who were going into slaughterhouses, to animal testing facilities and showing cruelty, documenting it, or saving animals or whatever. And they were being classified as terrorists, and they've gone to jail with felonies. Why I bring that up is because Jesus, remember, he's crucified between 2 thieves, right? Supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
The actual Greek word there is lestes or lestonai or something like that in the plural, but it's lestes. Lestes, again, another mistranslation of the word thief. We're going to talk about den of thieves and how that's a mistranslation too. But the more accurate translation of lestes, you can look this up. It's lestes means terrorist. It means insurrectionist or terrorist. The same way Barabbas was accused of being a revolutionary terrorist or whatever. So the thieves, Jesus is put on trial with Barabbas, a terrorist, and he's crucified between two terrorists. Interesting. Well, we also know that the crucifixion was reserved for terrorism, for people who were doing Roman sedition, like revolutionary acts against Rome, right? Well, scholars know that despite what we want to believe theologically about what led to Jesus' crucifixion, biblical scholars and historians agree that it was the act in the temple that led to his arrest and crucifixion. It wasn't because he said he was God or because he was even claiming to be the Messiah or any of that. Like, you could get away. There were crazy people during that time saying that kind of stuff.
No stone will be left on stone, and this temple is going to be destroyed.
He was condemning the temple. He said the temple's going to go down. And he went in and he actually, so you got to realize, we said it was a slaughterhouse, the temple, but it was also the banking center. It was also essentially the political center with the Sanhedrin, the justice center. It would be like it was the pharmaceutical industry of that time, because they were saying, oh, you got leprosy? Oh, come here and do our sacrifices and you'll be healed, right? It's like the big pharma of the time. It'd be like if someone today stormed the Vatican, the White House, big pharma, the Pentagon, all of that in one fell swoop. Imagine an organization did that. They would be completely shut down immediately. And that's what Jesus did. It says in Mark that he went to the temple the day before, and he basically scouted out the scene. So we know it was a premeditated act. Then in the Gospel of Mark, it says that they blocked anyone from bringing merchandise in and out, meaning animals. So they literally blocked anyone from bringing animals in. He declares, my house shall be a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of thieves. He also said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. He also is challenged when he's at the temple by a scribe. And the scribe says, well, what's the greatest commandment? Trying to trip him up, remember? And he says, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And what does the scribe say? The scribe says, oh, well, if we did that, yeah, we wouldn't need any sacrifices. We don't need the sacrifice. And Jesus says, you, my friend, aren't far from the kingdom. He responds to him saying that. The only time he said that, not even to his disciples, to anyone did he ever say that. But he says this scribe is not far from the kingdom because he realized sacrifice isn't necessary, that we are just supposed to honor God. So that shows what he's preaching. Now, he's come into the temple. He shut the whole thing down. As we know in John, he's freed the animals, even the oxen and the sheep. And he says, my house should be a house of prayer for all nations. He's quoting Isaiah when he says that. Remember, Isaiah says in Isaiah 11 that the wolf will lay with the lamb and they won't slaughter on my holy mountain, the temple. So he's calling to that prophet in one half. And in the second half, he says, you've made it a den of robbers. Well, he's quoting Jeremiah 7:11, which we showed earlier. Now type in Jeremiah 7:11, Hebrew. Yep, click on that Hebrew text analysis. So go to robbers or thieves, wherever it says, parisim. Yep, paritz. Okay. Now let's go down. Oh, go back to it. Let's show what it means. Yeah, click on that again. Go down. So violent one. Look at the exhaustive, right? Now, if you keep even going down, go down the Browns River Ridge. Robber, murderer. See that? Murderer. Now look at Ezekiel 18:10. Click on Ezekiel 18:10. It's the same word. If you have a son who sheds blood, a violent son who sheds blood, the word is paritz, a shedder of blood. It's defined in Ezekiel. Paritz is defined as a shedder of blood, someone who sheds blood. They're not shedding the blood of humans in the temple. They're not murdering humans in the temple. They're shedding the blood of animals. So Jesus is saying, this is meant to be a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of people murdering animals. What are you doing? And he frees them, right? Why? Because the house is meant to be a house of prayer with no slaughter, no shakath. Because the kingdom of heaven is one that has no slaughter, has no death. And in fact, even in Revelation, Revelation 21:4, it says all death will be wiped away. In Revelation 22:2, it says that they will return to the plant foods of the trees coming from the river of life, back to the Eden thing, right? So now here's where I get to like the Little Season crowd, if you're still listening at this point. If that's where we really are, or if we're in some version of something like that, then we don't even have the excuse of already not yet. Like Christ hasn't returned yet. He's going to make it. It's already, we're here. The biggest deception over our eyes is the fact that we're not following this and that we're continuing to kill 90 billion plus it's the same ritual system, but secularized. It's just the ritual of our table. And this is the altar. And we're taking it and eating it every single day and doing it to the idol of our bellies. You know, it's just a different type of God, but it's our own appetite and our own thing. But we're just killing and killing and killing when God said he's a God of life. So all that to say why it's relevant is I think for you even, or for anyone listening who comes from a Christian background, and again, I want to remind everyone, this is not how I was raised. But when the wool is pulled over your eyes, when you take the red pill of this message, like I said, Daniel's in Babylon, that's the matrix. You know, he's enslaved in the matrix. And the first choice he does is he says, nope, no more flesh, no more alcohol. And he breaks out of the matrix. He doesn't even get eaten by the lions. He survives the lions, whatever. If you want to survive, if you want to really see through the veil of what's going on around us, if you want to know what the true beast system is, right? Beast, listen to that, the animal system of all of these animals. The mark of the beast, people say that's the, you know, the shot, right? Some people say that. Mm-hmm. Listen to this. The word, can I say that word without you getting in trouble or banned? Okay. Vaccine comes from the Latin vaca, which means cow in Latin. Vaca is cow in Latin.
In Spanish too, I want to say.
Yeah. Well, Spanish is a Latin language. So the reason why is cows were the reason for creating the first vaccines for cowpox. Because like I said, when you herd animals, not only does it create war and slavery and all of this, but it also breeds disease. You know, all these animals confined together, living in their own feces and all of this, it creates disease. And like I said, the Nobel Prize winning book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, Jared Diamond, his whole thesis was that when the explorers went out and conquered the world, you know, conquistadors and all that, it wasn't their weapons actually that conquered nations, it was their disease. Because they had bred all these animals, they were herding cultures. And then all those diseases, they became immune to eventually. But when they brought them to the tribes, it just decimated them because most of the tribes were actually predominantly plant eating and they didn't have domesticated animals. So they created vaccines to inoculate cows for cowpox. And to this day, all of that blowback that we're getting, all of the, almost all of the quote unquote pandemics or epidemics or whatever resulted from animals, you know, swine flu, that's the cows, bird flu. Yeah, I mean, you can go on and on and on. You can look, they're called zoonotic diseases.
One asshole ate a bat in Chinese market, right?
Yeah, supposedly, or it was created in a lab from bats or whatever. Yeah,
allegedly, you too.
Allegedly. But my whole point is this: we have this vision of the kingdom of heaven that I think is really central to the message of Jesus, and it's central to the message of his movement, the Nasarenes, that's been lost to history. Like everything else, it's been obfuscated. But check this out. Look up Against Heresies 33. Heresies 33:5:5. Yeah. So click on that. Saint Irenaeus, remember he's this church father I was talking about that didn't have the fish in the, he's got the earliest accounts of the multitude stories and no fish. He talks about, scroll down a bit, he's doing a commentary on the book of Isaiah, this whole wolf will lay with the lamb, the lion will eat straw like the ox. And look at what he says. He talks about those days. Keep going down. Okay, go to number 4. Right there, stop right there. Okay. So at number 4, he talks about a saying that he heard from Polycarp, the hearer of John, who said he heard it from Jesus. So it's a lost saying of Jesus preserved by an early Catholic Orthodox church father, right? And what does he say? If you go back up, stop right there. So the fertility of the earth area, in the creation having been renovated and set free, this is talking about the kingdom of heaven, shall fructify with an abundance of all kinds of food. You see that verse? It's right. It's the line right above 563, the number. Mm-hmm. Yep. From the dew of heaven and from the fertility of the earth. And the elders who saw John, the disciple of the Lord, related that they had heard from him how the Lord would teach regarding these times, the times of the kingdom of heaven. The days will come when the vine shall grow, each having 10,000 branches, and in each branch 10,000 twigs, and in each true twig, 10,000 shoots, and in each one of the shoots, 10,000 clusters, and on every one of the clusters, 10,000 grapes. And every grape, when pressed, will give 5 and 20 meters of wine. And when one of the saints shall lay hold of a cluster, another shall cry out, I'm a better cluster, take me, bless the Lord through me. In like manner declared the Lord, Jesus, that a grain of wheat would produce 10,000 ears, and every ear shall have 10,000 grains, and every grain will yield 10 pounds of clear, pure, fine flour. And all other fruit-bearing trees and seeds and grass would produce in similar proportions, that the animals feeding only on the production of the earth shall in those days become peaceful and harmonious amongst each other and in perfect subjugation to man. These things are borne in witness in writing by Papias, the guy who wrote the Hebrew gospel. Remember, who or not wrote, but talked about how Matthew wrote the Hebrew gospel, the hearer of John and accompaniment of Polycarp. And he goes on to say, now these things are credible to believers, and that Judas didn't believe him when he said that. He goes on to say, how can the earth bring forth this much abundance? And then Jesus goes on to say, when prophesying that these times, therefore Isaiah said, the wolf shall feed with the lamb, the leopard shall. So he's basically saying this is how Jesus explained how the wolf will lay with the lamb and the lion will eat straw like the ox, is humans will return to plant foods, produce so much of them that even the animals return. So go down a little farther. He says, and it was right when the creation is restored, all the animals shall obey and be in subjugation to man and revert to the food originally given by God in his obedience to Adam. That is the productions of the earth. And the lion shall feed on straw. And so you see it. So that's the kingdom of heaven. In Jesus's gospel and his good news, preserved from every angle, he's saying no more slaughter, sacrifice, no more killing. This is essentially a demonic practice through the Enochian tradition, which Jesus totally quotes. Jude quotes the book of Enoch, right? So they're... So essentially what we see is, if we truly are followers of Jesus, of Christ, of the Messiah, and we want to follow and bring, like it says in the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven, where there is no slaughter, and where we see time and time again that heavenly vision is no more slaughter. This is why the Nazarenes and the early Christiani and everything were shutting down the temples, eating innocent and harmless food. James the Just, John the Baptist, Eusebius, the father of church history, says in Proof of the Gospel 3.5, you can even look this up, that all the apostles abstained from eating animals. But it's been lost to history. We aren't taught this. We've been given the exact inversion. That's what I was given. We've been given good food, good meat, good God, let's eat. God made animals for us to eat, baby. Let's go. Put that pork in my face, right?
Beef, not pork.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We've even got this clean versus unclean delineation. Oh, pork is bad, beef is good, blah, blah, blah. But in the eyes of the Nazarene, in the eyes of the kingdom of heaven, all of God's creatures are ours to serve, remember? Dominion is true stewardship. It's lowering oneself in service to. Animals were created before even humans in the creation account. And then Adam's first job is to name the animals. And in many ways, we learn about God's nature through animals. In Job, right, it says, ask the birds and they will teach you, right? Have you ever looked at Job 12? It's so beautiful, this oration of how the animals teach us about God. And we learn about God through the animals. But then we go and we slaughter and we kill them. You know, it's like slaughtering and killing an expression of God, a creature of God.
Well, chicken can fly, so I'm good with this.
Disrespecting the creature is disrespecting the creator, right? And so also on that note,
I agree with you. The way they treat animals and the way they grow animals, it's total disrespect.
And
I'm trying to buy pasture-raised eggs, let's say for an example, right?
But they all go to the same, well, pasture-raised eggs. The chickens still go to the same slaughterhouse as the regular chickens.
But at least they live on a pasture, not in this,
well,
not
this
even
is,
a cage, but in this thing, eat, poop,
but
bam.
But true kingdom of heaven vision, which I would argue is equal to what would now be considered or termed in modern times a vegan ideal, which is they're not meant to be exploited, period. They're not ours to use. Like God said, let me, Jesus says, I will gather you like a hen gathers her chicks. How's a hen going to gather her chicks if we're eating her eggs? She's not going to have any, right? So Jesus is pointing to the sparrows. Look at the sparrows. God's providing for them. He provides for us. We don't need to eat eggs. We've got all the fruits of the ground like we were given in Eden, right? And just on the eggs too, it's like all the male chicks are ground up because they're useless in the egg industry. We need female chickens. They genetically modify all of them to produce way more eggs. They grow super fast. All the pasture-raised stuff is whitewashing, greenwashing. It's never true. They're always half in cages all the time. Maybe they're in grass for a little while, unless you're literally finding someone with a backyard eggs or whatever. But even still, they're not ours. We don't need them. The cholesterol, the whole thing. I don't want to get into a diet debate, but the point is the kingdom of heaven is devoid of all of that from a Christian tradition, from a true early Nazarene Christian tradition. And in terms of us having some dominion or advantage or the image of God, we as humans have the image of God. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, right? Supposedly, according to the scripture.
How many concubines?
How many concubines? How many? Yeah.
Listen, if he pleased that many women, I want his diet, bro.
Right. Well,
he lost so many liquids with these women.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. He had tons of thousands of concubines. And it's funny. Some people will point to Solomon's many cow slaughters for his sacrifice or whatever. And they'll say, oh, see, Solomon was all about beef. But then I'm like, well, yeah, he also had all these concubines and he also did a bunch of demonology. You know, there's the whole story of his demonic kind of ponderings in sorcery.
Keys of Solomon.
Yeah. But what he did say, and this may not even be Solomon who wrote this, but it's attributed to him in Ecclesiastes, because a lot of people will say Solomon didn't actually write Ecclesiastes. But in Ecclesiastes 18:9, it says, God tests man to show him that he's like the animals. As one dies, so dies the other. Man has no advantage over animals. Both share the same ruach, which would be translated in English as breath, but ruach is the soul in Hebrew. It's the ruach that's given to the soul of the breath of God, the breath of life given to man and the animals. So in Ecclesiastes, it's saying God tests man to show us that we have the same soul. As one dies, so dies the other. We have no advantage over them, is what this text says. And I think that points to this idea of this boomerang effect that's happened where we're here as truthers and freedom fighters and saying the elite or this person or whatever, the system, the WF is doing this, whoever, and we're feeling enslaved and caught in this system, but we're turning around and doing the same thing to God's creatures. It's a boomerang effect back on us. Animals are the most chipped, tracked, confined, forced birth, forced death. Every bit of their lives is slavery. They're inoculated, vaccinated, pharmaceuticals, and then we turn around and we ingest all that. Not only that, the fear they have. You know, people talk about adrenochrome and all this with the Epstein stuff, but we got to realize all adrenochrome is, if it's real, is oxidized adrenaline in the blood. It's when the blood hits the air and it oxidizes. What do you think happens to the animals when they're getting slaughtered in the slaughterhouse and they're slit open and all that oxygen hits the blood? They're adrenalized. They're literally watching the cow before them get slaughtered and they're freaking out. We have footage in our film. By the way, in our film, we don't show anything gory or gruesome because we know people would have a hard time watching, but we do have a couple moments where we show leading up to, and there's a moment where there's a cow in a chute going to the slaughter and he sees the door come down and you can't see, but a cow in front of him gets taken out. And then they're trying to push that cow in next, and he's trying to move and get back, and he's freaking out because he knows what's about to happen. Imagine all the adrenaline. They have the same hormonal systems, with producing adrenaline and everything. So we're eating adrenochrome, and then we're wondering, oh, why am I so addicted? Why does it, meat makes me strong and muscular, whatever. Well, Epstein and the elites are saying, yeah, adrenochrome, blood, whatever, all the beliefs that people have, and the Epstein files have animal sacrifice in them too. It talks about Hillary Clinton. There's an email where she's like sacrificing chickens to Moloch or something, right? You've heard this. Yeah. So it's like, it's all one and the same. The ancient traditions that Jesus was overturning in his day, they were the same traditions that put animal and human sacrifice together. Baal, Moloch, the Canaanite religions, the stuff that's still happening today, it's animal and human sacrifice. But we've just secularized it, made it into this massive industrial system. that's hand in hand with big pharma, because the number one seller of pharmaceuticals is the animal agriculture industry. They need all the pharmaceuticals to make sure the animals don't get sick. And then we ingest all that and then we get sick and then we have to take more pharmaceuticals. So it's the beast system. It's the pharmakia. It's the thing that's been pulled over our eyes. And I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's triggering. I know people are going to be listening to this super triggered. They're going to want to find every reason to say why I'm a heretic, why I'm cherry picking, why I'm just crazy, or I'm somehow some dude with a vegan agenda that's trying to twist things in this direction. But I'm here to tell you, no, I was everything you are. And I was having those same pushbacks when I started to hear this stuff. When I started to look into it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a hunter, I'm a fisherman, my family owns a barbecue restaurant. What? How? No, there's no way. What about the fish? What about Abraham's ram? What about the sacrifices? What about, and I would do all the same things. And every time the deeper I looked, the more answers came and the more was revealed that Jesus and the Nazarenes were completely against this and for restoring the kingdom of heaven on earth, centrally taught through non-predation. So coming back to paritz, like I said, it's a shedder of blood. Jesus says, you've made the temple a den of paritz, quoting Jeremiah, who Jeremiah also says in the next following verses, God never commanded sacrifice, right? The paritz, Dr. James Tabor, when I told him this, he's a top Dead Sea Scroll scholar. And even he, knowing a lot of this material, he's the one who told me and first keyed me on to, oh wait, Jeremiah says God never commanded sacrifice. I learned that from him. But I was on a different path studying other things. And I told him, well, do you notice similarly that Jesus quotes Jeremiah and he calls it a den of paritz? And then he opens up his Hebrew lexicon. He starts looking and his mind's just blown. He's like, paritz, the Hebrew root literally means to shred apart flesh. It's a word used to describe primarily like a lion shredding the flesh of its prey. So we've become a den of paritz, shredding God's creatures all around the world.
But the animals are allowed to eat each other?
But again, according to Jesus's statement here in the vision of the kingdom of heaven, we're even going to get to a place where that's restored.
Yeah, but not now.
But it could be. So I'll give you an example. I used to think about this. Worthy objection. In fact, when I was going through a time of listening to like atheists that would push back against Christianity or the faith or a belief in God or whatever, I'm just always curious, like, oh, what do the atheists say? What are their arguments? And one of the best arguments that I ever heard is from Alex O'Connor. I'm sure you're familiar. Mm-hmm. He always brings up the problem of suffering, right? Which is a big atheist thing. Like, if there is a God, why would there be so much suffering in the world? But he says, wait a minute, we're not really taking that problem all the way. We're talking about problem of suffering in human terms. But what about the problem of animal suffering? And when I say animal suffering, I mean animal suffering at the hand of no human. Like, why in the Sahara or in the plains of Africa where no human is present, does a lion have to maul a gazelle to get food? And we get these descriptions like, oh, it's population control. They're culling this. And he's like, couldn't God have created a reproductive system for the gazelles that they could just naturally not overpopulate? And couldn't he have given the lions a diet where they didn't have to maul gazelles or, whatever? I was like, man, that's a really good argument. And it's answered by this tradition that it was never created to be that way. It was our own stewardship and our falling into eating and consuming and everything that led animals in that direction. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute, someone like Alex O'Connor, he's not going to buy it from a science perspective that somehow carnivores are going to become herbivorous someday. But check it out. So I go down this deep rabbit hole. There's evidence of polar bears all of a sudden now reverting from being, they're the most carnivorous animal on the planet because they live in the ice, that's all they can eat. But they're now starting to be omnivorous again. And they're growing even brown hairs back because they're a recent adaptation off of grizzly bears. And they got stuck in the ice and all they had to eat was meat, so it was survival. But now they're becoming omnivorous again. There's evidence of lions who are vegetarian. There's evidence of all this. But all that to say, I'm thinking about all that and the possibility. And then I'm contemplating this scripture. One of my favorite scriptures, the wolf shall lay with the lamb. We hear this all the time in terms of the Isaiah prophecy. And I'm like, how is this possible? Before I knew about this lost saying of Jesus and the plants growing and making an abundance of food for the animals, I'm like, how is this possible? And I kid you not, it was like it was like a sign from God. I'm looking over, I'm reading my Bible, I'm looking over my right, and my dog is sitting there. His name's Scout. He's been with me. I used to live out of a van, by the way, when I was making this film to save money, and he was living with me. He's my best friend, as all dogs are. And he wants food. He's looking at me like waiting for me to give him some food. Now, my dog's been vegan his whole life. I raised him that way. The longest living dog, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, for many years was vegetarian. So it's good for them because they're omnivores. So the same benefits they get from not eating animals. Now I'm looking at him and he's kind of like, are you gonna give me some food? And then all of a sudden I realize, I'm like, whoa, he's a wolf. Mm-hmm. His ancient ancestors are wolves. Mm-hmm. If I took Scout and I put Scout in a little pen with a lamb, he's not gonna eat the lamb. He's gonna play with the lamb or lie with the lamb or sniff him or whatever. He's not gonna eat him. Through human interaction and human relationship, wolves have become a species that could now lie with the lamb. We're in it. We're in the kingdom of heaven. We're in the prophecy. It's totally possible. It's just a matter of us choosing and having true stewardship with the animals around. And I'm not saying tomorrow, like, lions are just going to start eating, soy or something, tofu. But what I'm saying is we have a clear vision of what the early Christians believed, and we've been given an inverted truth, dare I say demonic, bloodlust, ritual magic, occult truth of God wanted all this death and all this bloodshed and all this suffering, when really we have over and over again evidence of Nazarenes, the movement, sayings of Jesus, the first Hebrew gospel of Matthew, Enochian tradition, Genesis Apocryphon, all of the texts, when you really look, that preserve the tradition that was really there, if we just look. And so all that to say, everybody's got to go on their journey and make their own decisions and their own path, and you do too. But I highly encourage everyone to watch my film first and foremost, because beyond all the heady scripture that I've talked about today, it gets into the ethics as well, shows these other things like slaughterhouse workers, and we go into kosher, we go into the red heifer sacrifice and how that's connected to the war and the implications of that. It's a fast-paced film. It's got 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, and we've had thousands and thousands and thousands of people do the Rotten Tomatoes. And everyone loves the film, regardless if you agree with it or not. So, yeah, that's Christspiracy. This is the film. Like I said, it's also called What Would Jesus Do? Because the film is driven by the question, what would Jesus do about animals? And yeah, you can go there. You can watch it totally for free.
Guys, support the authors.
But beyond this, I've given a lot of information in this. I've done a lot of other podcasts talking about a lot of other angles on this. But I truly believe that it's imperative. This is like the deepest question. This is the deepest red pill. We can talk about Little Season. We can talk about Nephilim. We can talk about 3-letter organizations controlling this and that and the other and doing deception. But I'm telling you, it all comes back to this. It all comes back to this. It's all rooted in this beast system that's going on. And we're going to keep pointing our fingers in other directions and missing right here in our heart the law that was written on our heart about God's creatures, that was right there from the very beginning, that the prophets echo. Like Jeremiah says, the law shall be written on your hearts. And like I said, every bit of our own slavery and the things that ail us that we wish would be different about governments and about, churches or this or whatever it is, this is something practical that we can do every day in our lives. We make this decision every day with what we put on our plate. We make this decision every day with what we wear. We make this decision every day with how much we feed that beast system with our dollar and pay for slaughter and torture and abuse and all of that, exploitation. And what's more beautiful than being able to just make a simple choice and do something different and it have a ripple effect on the greater expansion of the kingdom of heaven? Like Jesus said, it's like leaven spread throughout. It grows over time. It's like a mustard seed. It's the smallest little act, but it becomes this massive plant and grows into this huge, just like that lost saying of the explosion of the kingdom of heaven. And if we all made that choice, imagine all the abundance we could be living in. You know, if you're someone who doesn't even care about animals, but you care about humans, there's a stat, I believe, that 80% of children on the planet who live in hunger, like perpetual hunger, that 80%, their food, their plant foods that are grown around them are taken away and fed to animals to fatten them up to feed people in the West.
Okay, but I've heard the vice versa stats that if you want to have more plant food, you have to take more territories, a lot, and the amount of water that it would need to water it, it's going to be
so 70%,
insane.
70% of cropland on the planet, usable cropland, is used to feed animals, to fatten them up, and we only get 12 to 18% of those calories back. It's an inefficient system. We lose. And you can fact check any of this, but all of these crops that were going around the world that could feed we could end world hunger like that, let alone the subsidies. Look at our tax dollars. We're all up in arms about taxes. Taxes are through the roof. It's insane. So much of our taxes go to feed the livestock industry because it's inefficient and it's a money pit. You know, there's big blocks of cheese, like I think under the ground in the Midwest, just rotting away. Government cheese, literally, because they don't have anything to do with it, and they pumped all these subsidies into it, and now it's just sitting there rotting. We have, I think it's $300 billion a year are given of our tax dollars to livestock, compared to 400 million for vegetable and grain crops that we eat as humans. Listen to that difference. 300 billion to livestock versus 300. Look at the inefficiency. It's unbelievable. So if you're someone who cares about, if you're anti-tax, if you're small government, we're inflating our government to run this. They're all powered by the lobbyists, the animal agriculture industry. They're going out there and they're just funneling all this money through so they pass all their laws to be able to do all of this. In fact, you know, we mentioned the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, where they made terrorists out of animal activists who were exposing the cruelty. You know, there's a guy named Howard Lyman. They call him the Mad Cowboy because he was a cattle rancher who blew the whistle on mad cow disease when it started, if you remember that craze. Here in America, we had something called mad cow disease, where all these people were getting like this trippy dementia kind of quirk, and they were losing their minds.
I'm going to stop you right there. It's 1:45.
Yeah.
2 p.m. you have to be in a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, bro, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried you're going to miss the meeting.
So Howard Lyman is a cattle rancher. He blew the whistle on mad cow disease. Mad cow is a disorder that was affecting a bunch of Americans and making people crazy, literally out of their minds. And Howard Lyman blew the whistle that the reason why is because they were feeding cows back to other cows. They were cannibalizing cows. And it was creating this mental disorder in the cows. Now, Howard Lyman was sued by the livestock industry for making this statement, even though it was true. And he went on Oprah talking about it, and Oprah got sued as well for hosting him and having that theory out there. And it went on for 10, 15 years, something like that, this lawsuit. All the way to the Supreme Court it went. And finally, they were able to win, and they were able to get out of the lawsuit. But after that lawsuit, the law was changed so that you can't even say something untrue about the livestock industry and it affect their profits to their bottom line without getting taken to court and potential liability for saying something untrue. Or I'm sorry, true. I said that wrong. Howard Lyman said,
but even if it's not true, the First Amendment, guys.
Exactly. Yeah. Either way. But I said it backwards there, but you get the point. It's that if you even say something true about the livestock industry,
you can get
and
sued.
You affect their bottom line, you can get sued, and you can potentially even go to jail for it. So all that to say is our free speech, all the way back from the scriptures, like we said with the Nazarenes, to now with the group trying to blow the whistle on it. It is the ultimate censorship. It's the ultimate loss of key tax dollars. It's the ultimate funneler of big government. It's the big pharma. It's all of it. And our great leaders of the past, like Jesus, you know, my ultimate hero, were trying to show us, but like everything else, the message was lost in translation.
Cam, Thank you for coming. Guys, watch the movie, support the authors. I think we should do part 2.
Yeah.
Next time you're in the West Coast in the LA area, please give me a call.
Yeah, everybody's going to be commenting all the objections, so maybe
That's
take
awesome.
notes and we can go through all of
Okay.
those.
Okay. Please, guys, do it, but be respectful. No name calling. God bless you. Jesus Christ is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords,
King
the
of
God
Kings.
Himself.
Yeah, he's the ultimate Hamashiach, King, leader of the way. And ask, what would Jesus do?
Amen. Amen. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I would love to say thank you for watching this entire episode till the very end. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and click here or here and watch another great episode. God bless you.